A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined at segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're going to be chatting it up with him about what he's taking a look at going into conference play, the dynamics of Big Ten and Big 12 play, with there being some very dominant teams out there, but still a lot of competitive teams. We're going to be taking a look at a few games that we've got for Thursday, how he's taking a look at a divide between the haves and the have-nots in all of college basketball, and those top teams separating themselves, and so much more in the final segment. Going to get you guys picks and analysis for the first time this year for 2026 on every game that we've got on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday, as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but boy, did we have a fun day of college basketball to wrap up 2025. So let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
St. John's closes out the year with a big giant bang as they and Georgetown were very much hitting a bunch of threes, and for St. John's, they pull out a 95-83 win to be able to get the cover as they went 15 out of 27 from three-point range. Josiah Sellers was able to go 4 of 5 from 3 with 16 points. Zuby Ejiofor a double-double, 25 points, 10 rebounds through, and there's 7 assists for good measure as well. And Georgetown, who's been rough with their three-point shooting, they do go 9 of 21 from three-point range with KJ Lewis supplying 27 points. He had 18 points out of Malik Mack, but the lone two double-figure scores for this team, and they lose a turnover battle 12-11. They actually don't do too bad on the rebounding front, 36-33, but St. John's, they were just very much knocking down their shots, and they got the job done. Elsewhere in Big East play, you saw Villanova be able to get by DePaul, but they come nowhere close to covering that spread. 71-66 to finalize for Villanova, 10-23 from three-point range. Bryce Lindsey continues to be hot from 3, 5-10 from 3, 19 points on Tyler Perkins as well. He goes 4 of 6 from three-point range, and Duke Brennan, once again, 12 rebounds, but for Villanova, they do lose a rebound battle, 43-39. DePaul loses this game because they go 7-12 at the free throw line and 5-19 from 3, but still, relatively solid performance out of CJ Gunn with 15 points, and for DePaul, they did lose the turnover battle, 14-8, and then the other big-time Big East game, that'd be UConn going on the road and absolutely throttling Xavier, 90-67, the final as for UConn. They go 13 out of 28 from three-point range. Musketeers just 4 of 18 from 3, and he did have Phil Brochovin for Xavier supply 14 points and 11 rebounds, but for UConn, just too much down low out of them. They were able to win the rebound battle 42-26. He had Alex Caravan supply 7 boards, 19 points, and for UConn, they just continue to roll. Other ranked teams that were in action, you had a few intriguing ones on Wednesday, including Duke just barely being able to get by Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech actually had a 43-39 lead at the half. They seem to be playing some better basketball, 85-79. Duke does find a way to get the job done, nowhere near covering, as for Georgia Tech, 10 of 18 from three-point range. Kawasi Reeves, 5 of 7 from the outside. He supplies 23 points. Now, Georgia Tech has had some turnover issues, and they had them once again in this game, 17-12. They do lose the turnover battle, but for Duke, bailing them out, guess who? Cameron Boozer, 26 points, 12 boards, pair of assists, so he did a nice job there. And Duke, on a day where they went just 9 of 32 from three-point range, they do find a way to be able to eke that one out, and this was a rough beat if you had it. Like, there were some places where you did not have the overhit until pretty much the final bucket of double overtime. There were some places that had this at one point at like a 154.5, close more around about 153.5, but regardless, you should have gotten this under in Virginia versus Virginia Tech, as the game was 55 to flip at 55 at the end of regulation. Goes to overtime, you survive overtime, and then you pretty much survive all but the final bucket of double overtime before Virginia Tech wins 95-85 and triple overtime. So feel you if you had the under there. And for Virginia Tech, just 9 of 28 from three-point range, but Virginia was 10 of 45 from distance after being one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball coming in. Thaddeus DeRitter, 22 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, but also 6 turnovers. For Virginia, they lose the turnover battle 17-14, and Virginia Tech at Ben Hammond scored 30 points off the bench and went 16 of 18 at the free throw line. Played 42 minutes off the bench, by the way. And for Virginia Tech, they only had one player. He played more than 12 minutes off the bench. So they very much utilized that starting five. But somehow, some way, they do find a way to be able to get the job done. Didn't have a lot of ranked teams in action on Wednesday, but you still had a lot of fun. And you did still have some very interesting games with Loyola Chicago as a double-figure underdog, being able to knock off Rhode Island 61-57 the final. Rhode Island just 5 of 26 from three-point range. You did have Jonah Hinton give you 15 points, and for Loyola Chicago, Justin Moore did give you more. He did have 6 turnovers, and Loyola Chicago loses his turnover battle 24-12, and yet they still win the game because for Mr. Moore, 19 points. Loyola Chicago, 8 of 20 from 3, and Rhode Island, that 5 of 26 mark from the outside, proved to be very, very costly. So Ramblers do find a way to ramble on to a W there. You saw NC State hold down Wake Forest 70-57 the final. Certainly got an under there, but for Wake Forest, just 8 of 31 from 3-point range. They lose the rebound battle. Wake Forest does 40-35, and they also lost the turnover battle 16-15 for NC State. Not necessarily the world's greatest shooting out of them, and Darian Williams only 8 points in this game, but Kadir Copeland continues to be a stat sheet sufferer. Did have 7 turnovers, but 7 assists, 14 points, so NC State, they do find a way to be able to persevere and get the job done there. Also being able to persevere and get the job done. How about a nice quality winner from Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, 74-64. They go on the road. They get the win and cover over Northwestern State. As for the Stephen F. Austin team, not a team that generates turnovers anymore. Northwestern State only 7 turnovers in this game, but for Northwestern State, just 4 of 17 from 3-point. Stephen F. Austin, currently a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So nice quality performance there. A not so quality performance out of the UTSA Roadrunners. Meep to them being on the road to running to a bad year. 110-70. Florida Atlantic absolutely lambasted UTSA. As for Florida Atlantic, 18 of 35 from 3-point range. Devin Vanterpool was able to supply 21 points. You had 6 different guys scoring double figures for Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic wins the rebound battle 47-29 as well. So that was just a nice, fun old butt kicking out there. And this was fun as well. Buffalo, they have been a nice surprise team at 12-2 in the back, 81-67. They take down Northern Illinois. Buffalo, one of your better 3-point shooting teams in the country, 11 of 26 from 3 as Daniel Freitag. He was able to supply the team with 33 points. And for Buffalo, they also do a nice job winning the rebound battle by a count of 34-31. And that was a game that was supposed to be played on Tuesday. And this was a game where George Mason, you expected them to be able to dominate LaSalle. They don't quite cover, but they pull away in the second half, 80-75 the final. As for George Mason, they do lose the rebound battle 39-36, but they did a solid job being able to just take care of the ball. 0 turnovers from George Mason, only 4 from LaSalle. So you had a lot of clean possessions in this game. And then for George Mason, you had Corey Mincy supplied 21 points, 19 points in this one out of Riley Allenpatch. So for George Mason, they do find a way to persevere. Don't get the cover, but they do get the job done. And for Syracuse, in the return of Donnie Freeman, they were unable to pull it out against Clemson, 64-61 the final, though Donnie Freeman looked very solid. Came in off the bench for 28 minutes, 18 points, 9 rebounds, so that's very encouraging. But for Syracuse, who had been shooting 59% at the free throw line, they actually go 20 of 24 at the free throw line. Clemson goes 6 of 12 at the free throw line, but Clemson wins this game because they win the turnover battle 15-12. They win the rebound battle 31-30, and they had on their side Mr. RJ Gottfried, who was able to supply the team with 14 points. So in a slog of a game, Clemson does find a way to pull that one out. Dayton is able to get the win, but they were a 14-plus point favorite in this game. They come nowhere close to covering. Fordham holds in there 63-56. Dayton gets that outright win, but they lose the rebound battle. Dayton does 41-33 for Fordham, just 9 of 34 from 3-point range, so less than savory out there. But for Fordham, they were able to hold in there with DeJour Reeves being able to supply 18 points. And for Dayton, they have been a good team in terms of generating turnovers. Did win that turnover battle by a count of 15-8. For Tulsa, it's been a nice start to the season for them, and they absolutely land-based Rice. 97-48 the final as they go 13 of 19 from 3-point range. Jalen Lewall, 5 of 6 from the outside, 25 points. David Green, who's been cold from 3 to start the year, he's starting to heat up, 19 points out of him. He goes 3 of 4 from the outside for Rice. They lose the turnover battle 12-10. They lose the rebound battle 43-26, and they shot 28% from the floor. So that's not necessarily what they were looking for out there. This is exactly what these guys were looking for. A nice win. St. Louis 102-79 all over St. Joe's. As for St. Louis, it's it's not even been Robbie Alvalo. It's been the main star for the team. He did have 20 points in this game, but he didn't even enter into this game, the team's top scorer, but 19 of 32 from three-point range. St. Joe's actually heating up a little bit with their three-point shooting, 9 of 25, but yeah, in a year where they lost Billy Lang just before the start of the season, this has been less than savory for them, to say the least, and for George Washington, it's been a little bit up and down for them, but they start out 8-10 play with a win, 99-85. They take down Richmond. Richmond goes 12 of 28 from three. George Washington, 17 out of 33 from three-point range, and Rafael Castro, 27 points. He was rock solid. Trey Autry, he was able to supply the team with 25 points of his own, so that was a nice quality winner. And then for St. Bonaventure, they were leading throughout much of their game against VCU. They let go of the rope late, but they were still able to get you a quality cover if you were in on the points, much like myself. For VCU, they win by a count of 89-82, and there was a late three that helped out St. Bonaventure in terms of that cover as well. But for VCU, they were able to find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done out there, as it was actually a lead of 77-71 for St. Bonaventure with about 6 minutes remaining in the game. So they did let go of the rope there, but still got that nice quality cover, and you were able to get a nice quality cover with these guys as well. For Wichita State, they were the underdog, and they went outright against UAB by a count of 75-70, and for Wichita State, 9 of 20 from three-point range. Keenan Giles, 8 of 13 from three. The rest of the team was 1 of 7, but 26 big points out of him. For UAB, they lose the rebound battle 75-70, and UAB continues to take care of the ball. They win the turnover battle 11-7, but just 3 of 12 from three-point range. A very suspect three-point shooting team. And then also out there in the American, Memphis, they don't quite get the cover against North Texas, but they do win a very, very sloppy game. 57-48, the finalists for North Texas. 1 of 18 from three-point range, and they lose a rebound battle 38-30. Memphis, 20 turnovers. North Texas, this was 18 turnovers for them. A game so ugly only a mother could love. But Memphis, they do love to be able to get that outright win, and they did find a way to persevere and get the job done, and so did South Alabama. South Alabama, 63-58 in a slog of their own. They find a way against Louisiana. Louisiana, only 8 turnovers in this game, but they go 13 out of 40 from three-point range. South Alabama is inducing teams to shoot over 60% of their field goal attempts from three, and for South Alabama, they get by because Adam Olson was able to supply the team with 26 points. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise what we're getting in college basketball right now, it's a very equal split between overs and unders. 1,092 overs, 1,086 unders, so 50.1% rate to the over. Favorites are hitting at about 50.5% against the spread, 1,093, 1,071, and 39. Meanwhile, if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, so ever since Christmas, overs are hitting at about 51%, 76, 73, and I believe that you've had along the way 3 pushes, and favorites 74, 73, and 5 against the spread, so very equal there. That's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, right here on Tuscaloosa, with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such an excellent job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that it is bowl season, and he is very locked in with regards to that. He and Kobe Dant do an absolutely excellent job looking at the betting board night in and night out, both at the college football front and the college basketball front. When it comes to college baseball, they're going to be prepared there. And if you're looking for some West Virginia talk as well. He does a great job with the Ryan and Rush show. You're able to follow Ryan on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Greg. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. And this is the last interview that both of us are going to be doing in 2025 before we go to 2026. And you'll be hearing this pretty much a interview that happened last year, which I always love to be able to make those funny jokes. But that said, going into 2026, how do you take a look at the landscape of college basketball? Because I know that I've asked you about this once or twice, but I really feel like it's a case where you've got sort of those like top 5, top 6. There's probably a line of demarcation after like 5 or 6 versus the rest of college basketball right now.
There really is, Greg. I think you hit the nail on the head. Those teams at the top have really separated themselves. I don't think we're going to have much debate on the 1 and 2 lines, maybe the final 2 seed, but Michigan, Arizona, Iowa State, Purdue, Gonzaga, UConn, and Duke, I think it just really separated themselves. And then you look at a team like Vanderbilt and BYU and maybe Louisville and Houston, can they work their way into that top 10 or top 8 that everybody wants to be in? Because you do get a definite advantage from a regionality standpoint once we get to the NCAA tournament if you can crack those top 8.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that's going to be really interesting to see how some of those top teams are able to fare, because I do think that even though Gonzaga got tested a few days ago against San Diego, they might be a team that's going to be there when it's all said and done. And with these top teams, I feel like the test is going to be a little bit different, because if you want to throw UConn in there, I wouldn't have a lot of qualms about them. Other than St. John's, it's a very weak Big East this year. Meanwhile, in the Big Ten, Michigan, they certainly look like the top team in all of college basketball, but I'm very curious to see how they do against Purdue. And I think the team that might be able to really undo them, Michigan State as well. And I feel like there might be some good tests for some of these top teams, and they might be starting to get just a little bit overvalued going into conference play.
Yeah, and I think we saw that last year with Florida, and then they took a couple lumps there once they got to conference play, but then regained the mojo once we got to the big dance. UConn the 1 year, heck, they finished 4th, and they had a 5-game losing streak to begin Big East play before they were able to regain the magic going into March Madness. But yeah, you see it a lot of these times. These teams peak very, very early. But like you said, man, it's definitely a marathon here in college basketball.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I do think that that's a little bit of an interesting dynamic. And it's actually something I look at a little bit in baseball as well. You want to be playing your best baseball at the best time when it comes to that sport, and obviously in college basketball as well. How much do you look at these teams that they start fast early, then they cool down a little bit maybe this time of year, and then they actually ascend when it matters the most? Because I do think that with regards to college basketball, a lot of the top teams sort of go hot, cold, and then hot again.
2 out of the last 3 national champions have done exactly that, Florida and UConn, like we just talked about. And I'm drawing a blank. There was a team 10 years ago that ran through it, and then they finished like 5th. It was UConn in 2014, where heck, they finished, I think, 9-9 in Big East play, but they were really good in the non-con.
I think that was when they were in the American, actually.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. It's just, it's you see it all the time. For whatever reason, conferences, these coaches just know each other so much and have so much familiarity, and just scouting is so good, especially in like the Big 12 and Big 10, where the coaches are just been around each other for so long. I agree with you. I'm going to make some notes on some of these teams that looked really good in non-con because of their style of play, and probably look to back them once we get to March once again.
Trust me, I have a ton of affinity for that 2014 UConn team that as a 7th seed won it all, because I actually wrote a big article at the first website I was at making the case that the 7th seed UConn had a chance to be able to make it to the Final Four, and they won the whole thing. So that was one that I was very, very happy with, as we're always happy to have Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly that's going to be a lot of fun to be taking a look at. And I know you're a man that's out there in Big 12 country with being out there in West Virginia, and just how do you take a look at that conference? Because I think that the 2 clear top teams right now, that would be Iowa State along with Arizona, with the way that they have just absolutely ran roughshod through non-conference play. These are 2 of the top 4 teams in all of college basketball. But again, you've got a team like a Houston lurking out there. We don't know the status of Mr. Darren Peterson, great last name, but if he can come back for Kansas, that's going to be a rock solid team. You've got a lot of unknowns with the TCU team that has lost at home to New Orleans, but they've also knocked off Wisconsin and Florida on a neutral court as well. And I think that that conference is going to be really one that separates themselves from the rest, along with the Big Ten when it's all said and done, because I do think that those 2 conferences in the Big 12 and the Big Ten certainly have the most depth and have those top teams.
It's going to be fascinating because we see this top tier forming in the Big 12. The top 5, 6 teams are really, really good. All that I think can get to a Final Four here. And then I think you see a little bit of the same in the Big Ten as well. That tier that you talked about with Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State, they're really, really good. They match that top five in the Big 12. So the SEC doesn't really have the ceiling that they had last year. Their floor is pretty solid for the most part, and they've done a good job of avoiding really bad losses. So I'm interested to see who gets hot in the SEC to kind of separate themselves because I think we will see a lot of bubble teams come March just because of how much parity is in that league.
Yep, it is going to be a lot of fun to be taking a look at. And is there a sleeper team or two that you have your eye on? Because certainly with Baylor, they've been the team in the
Yeah.
news the most with Mr. James Nanji, the 31st pick in the draft, and was a part of the Carl Anthony Towns trade. Now signing
Yeah.
for Baylor, getting 4 years of eligibility, which. Yeah, I understand that we don't need to go back to having sanctions for a guy getting peanut butter with his bagel, but maybe we've went a little bit too far here. That said, is there any other team out there in the Big 12 that maybe is outside that top tier that you think could be able to make some noise here in conference play?
I'm with you, man. Some rules. I mean, you can't be a part of like a blockbuster trade, but geez Louise. I'll go Texas Tech, Greg. I mean, they just beat Duke. I think they found something recently. They lost to Arkansas, lost a couple of these tough games, but I think that they found something. McCaslin's teams always get better and better. I look for Texas Tech to once again be under the radar in the Big 12.
Yep, and with Texas Tech, I think the big key is defense because the offense has been there for them. You know what JT Toppin is going to be able to give you. Need a little bit more defense out of this Texas Tech team, as we do have our good friend Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and not really going to be seeing any of those Big 12 teams in action on Wednesday. We're going to be seeing them much more towards the weekend and have some Big 10 action going down on Friday as well. That's going to be a lot of fun, but we've got ourselves what I like to call a lot of steak on Thursday. Not necessarily the sizzle teams, not necessarily these top 25 teams, but we do have ourselves a lot of mid-major games. And is there anything that you're going to be taking a look at in terms of the card for Thursday? Because I do think that there are some interesting conferences out there. What we're going to be able to get out of the Big West, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. And I do think that the Missouri Valley Conference, having a light shined on them to begin the year, is going to be great as well. But anything with regards to teams or games that is really catching your eye?
I think that this, just like, what was it? It was Monday night. And so now we get to Monday to Thursday here. I thought Monday's card was extremely underrated in college basketball. I thought it was kind of a mid-majors dream in terms of just like getting WAC play, getting Missouri Valley play, getting Horizon
Don't
play.
threaten me with a good time.
Big Sky, like I know that this isn't the sexy games that everybody falls in love with, except for me, you, Colby, and probably Rocco Miller and some other diehard college basketball guys. But like these games are quality. Like Utah Valley at Tarleton, those are two of the top teams in the league. Bradley at Belmont, Oakland at Youngstown. You even go over to the Big Sky, Northern Colorado at Montana State. So I'm looking forward to the card. Now we have to remember too, me and you, we were talking pre-show. This is New Year's Eve that we're recording this, and this is obviously a night of festivities and distractions. I kind of think that this favors the road team in this handicap just because of all the distractions on campus and just for the home team.
And do you think that it's actually an advantage for these road teams that are going to, shall we say, smaller cities? Because if you were traveling out to, say, lovely Las Vegas to play UNLV, which UNLV not going to be in action on Thursday, I think that there might be a little bit more distraction versus going to, and I'm sorry to do this, but going out to... How about if we throw out there Missoula, Montana, a place that I've been once in my life? Like, I had a great time going to Missoula, Montana. Not necessarily a place where I think is going to be necessarily popping on New Year's Eve, though.
Yeah, just because you and I might have fun there doesn't mean that these 18 to
Oh,
22-year-olds
Missoula, Montana, give me some beers. I am having a great time out there.
Yeah, that fits more of me and you. What we like to do is just have a couple beers and watch these games compared to these 18 to 22-year-olds that like to do other things after dark. So
Go
yeah,
out to Hakkasan.
exactly. I definitely think it favors the road team. I think it's less distractions away from the other things that they like to do on campus. And I just think when you're in a hotel, you can at least manage the distractions to a certain degree. Obviously, you can't take away all the distractions. These still are 18 to 22-year-olds that are making a lot of money. But yeah, I definitely think it favors the road teams, and the students aren't on campus for the most part for these environments.
And how do you take a look at the day games that we're getting as well? Because we're going to have some fun night games that are going to be coming up on this January 1st, but we also have some games that are going to be starting out with like a hearty noon local time tip, and those are the games where I really think it favors the under because you might have some guys out there dragging, and maybe they were going a little bit too hard to celebrate the fact that we're now in 2026.
Yeah, I like the unders. Heck, I like the unders in the daytime, even when there's not the New Year's Eve element. You see it in March Madness every year, or conference tournaments every year, or Feast Week. It definitely favors the under, and it definitely usually favors the underdog or the road team.
Absolutely. As Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work with the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me on Coast to Coast Soups. And I do think that we have ourselves a lot of intrigue and a lot of fun that is going to be coming up for this Thursday. And is there any games that are really standing out to you that you do have a little bit of a star around and ones that you might be placing a bet on?
I think I'm going to be on Oakland in a bounce back. I trust Campy. I think they're a tough team to prepare for. They get Youngstown. I like to take teams that kind of lose. I know that they kind of got blown out in the end, but you lose a coin flip where the line was either 3 or 4 points, and then they're getting points the next game, or in a toss-up where usually they're able to get a split on these road trips. Coaching staffs make such a strong emphasis, just get a split on the road and protect home court. So I'm a big advocate of kind of buying the dip here on the second leg where you stay out on the road in an environment, and then your practice, you get to practice in the gym, you get shoot around in the gym. So you get more acclimated into these road environments than you usually do on a traditional just single game trip.
Yep, I do think that that is a very good look to be taking a look at. And this one I think is going to be a lot of fun as well. We've got Cal Baptist versus UT Arlington in a WAC matchup. That's a relative coin flip game where Arlington opened up a pick. They're now 1.5 point underdog at a total of 135.5. Again, with UT Arlington, I'm sure it's a nice city. I've actually spent some time out in Houston, Texas, so I do know that they know how to party out there. But I look at this Cal Baptist team being so defense-oriented and UT Arlington having a tough time taking care of the ball. And I think that on a day like this, especially these teams that do a poor job of taking care of the ball are teams I'm going to fade even more heavily than normal, and I think that this sort of a spot favors Cal Baptist.
I think you're right. I liked what I saw from Cal Baptist for the most part. I know they lost the game, but I still think that they're pretty good, and I liked what I've seen from them in the non-con. So back to my point of they stayed out on the road, went straight from Valley over to Arlington. I think that they make shots here, and they're able to grind it out and get a split on this double road trip.
Absolutely. I think that we are going to be in for a great slate of college basketball to begin 2026. And in 2026, I know that I'm going to need to invite you on plenty, my friend, because you, Ryan, do such an excellent job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Every single time you join me, we all get a little bit smarter. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, go check us out over at the College Experience. Every single night, I'm at Moneyline_Mac on my personal, and can't wait to ring in the new year. And the road to Indy really gets going here starting tomorrow now that we got conference play from here on out.
Absolutely. It is going to be tremendous. And I know that our good friend Ryan, he is dialed in on this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday, the first of 2026, as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ryan McIntyre, who does such a good job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast. I work looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday, this first day of 2026, as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two bigger conference teams first, and then these are the games that are going to be at the bottom, the Atlantic Sun Conference games. That's the only of the extra games board conferences that is going to be in action on this day, so that makes things nice, clean, and easy. Let's get things started with 727-728. Oakland is on the road against Youngstown St. Youngstown St, a 1-1.5 point favorite, 157.5 to 158.5 is the total, and I did set a line of 1.5, so I'm willing to lay the one with Youngstown State, not willing to go too much further, as you do have a little bit of a tempo war going on with Oakland. This has been a pretty up-tempo team, about 68th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Youngstown State more around 226th, and I think it's very clear that this is an Oakland team that's going to be looking to thrive on offense. This is a Youngstown State team that's looking to thrive on defense. This has been a Youngstown State team that's been a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, they are 131st, and for Oakland right now, they are outside the top 330 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So strangely, and this happens with Oakland every year, they're actually giving up more than 3 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. It's one of the strangest things I've really ever seen, but for this Oakland team, they are shooting about 34.8% from three, but that does go down to about 33.5% when they're away from home. I do like what Brody Robinson has brought to the table. Comes in after he was at UT Arlington to begin his career and has supplied this team with 17 points, 6 assists. He's shooting 40% from three-point range, and they've got some solid rebounding. You've had Zaire Wells, Isaac Garrett, and Buri Navalura be able to combine for about 18 rebounds per game, so they've done a solid job there. And then you've been able to get a little bit out of Michael Hoagie, who missed the first 5 games of the season, 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, but not really a guy that's going to light you up from three. And even though Oakland is a solid three-point shooting team, they're looking to pound the ball more inside. They're top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from two-point range, and with this Youngstown State defense, they've done a very rock-solid job in terms of forcing things inside, as they're a top 25 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from inside the arc, top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And for this Youngstown State team, they are outside the top 200 with regards to defensive rebound percentage, but Oakland outside the top 260 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so they're not grabbing a lot of second chances. And with Youngstown, you've got Chris Carroll caroling all the way to 17 points, 5 boards. He shoots 46.5% from three. And Youngstown State overall has been a top 120 team with their three-point shooting percentage at 35.5%. Rich Rolfe shoots 42% from three with about 10 points per contest. You don't have anyone on this roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but each of your top 4 scorers give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game, so been a relatively balanced effort for Youngstown State. They do need to clean up the turnovers outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but also have an Oakland team that's really not been forcing the issue in terms of generating turnovers outside the top 250 with that regard. So I did make Youngstown State the slimmest of favorites at home at 1.5, so willing to lay up to 1 with them. Made my total 155.5. I think that the turnovers for Youngstown State might cost you an over, so in on the under and in on Youngstown State. 729, 730 on the card. Georgia Southern is on the road against Coastal Carolina. Shot to clears find themselves as a favorite of 1.5 to 2 points. 157.5 is the total, and I did set my line at 1.5, so 2+ is going to be my buy point on Georgia Southern. Now, I also did set a total here of a 157.5, so going to be waiting on a little bit of movement. I saw an initial 157 out there. If we could get to a 157 or less, I will be in on the over, as you do have a Coastal Carolina team that's playing much more up-tempo this year than they did a season ago. Right now, they're checking in terms of total possessions per game inside of the top 150. After last year, they were as slow as molasses. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you've got a bunch in Georgia Southern that's really looking to play harebrained and up-tempo. They're a top 35 team in terms of total possessions per game, and for Georgia Southern, they have been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while Coastal Carolina is sort of a make-it-or-take-it sort of team. Coastal Carolina, top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 335 in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, but have been a top 125 team in terms of just really holding teams down in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, mainly because they are a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They aren't really going to give you too much with regards to generating those turnovers, but they allow those percentages to be very, very low. And with Coastal Carolina, they've got Joshua Beadle and Rashi Jones in the backcourt doing a nice job in tandem, combining for just under 30 points per game. With Jones, he's your main 3-point shooter at 35%. Meanwhile, Beadle throws in their 3 assists, 1.1 steals per game. And for Coastal Carolina, each of your top 3 scorers throw in there. AJ Dantzler, I'll give you at least 2.5 assists per game. This team is not going to give you a lot in terms of second and third chances. They're outside the top 200 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they've also been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, having Reggie Hill down low be able to give you about 6 or so rebounds per game. But for this Georgia Southern team, you have to love what Spud Webb has been able to give you, as he's been the main scorer right now with about 16.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, good versatility there. Georgia Southern only about 200th with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, and this has been a team that's been getting roughed up down low. They are outside the top 270 in terms of defense defensive rebound percentage, but they're also a top 55 team in terms of taking care of the ball to make the most out of their possessions. Tyron Moore, who was the top scorer for the team 2 years ago, has come back to give the team 12 points, shooting 39% from three. Kiari Dunn has been able to step up with 37% three-point shooting. He's throwing in there 7.5 points per game, and then Nakavian White throwing in there 11 points per game. I think is going to do just enough for Georgia Southern to be able to hold in there and remain lively. I think that they win the turnover battle, and with them being able to get clean possessions, I do think that you are going to see a lot of scoring in this game. So at a 157 or less, in on the over end, willing to take 2+ here with Georgia Southern. 731, 732 on the card. It is Sam Amford on the road against VMI. VMI's home underdog of 4.5 points, 151 after 152.5 is the total. So Samford is a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with VMI. This team has been dealing with injuries all season long, mainly to Ricky Bradley, who was a very good scorer for the team a few seasons ago. He was over at Georgia State for a little bit of time, has come back, and when he was out there last year for the team, he gave the team 16 points per contest, but we have yet to see him this year, so that has put a lot on TJ Johnson, who's been very good. 18.5 points, 8 boards, he only shoots about 32% from three. VMI as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from three, country average with that regard, but this is a VMI team that is also outside the top 230 in terms of their rebound percentage, and they do face off against the Samford team that's been able to do a great job of taking care of the ball, and that's really been the forte for VMI. They're a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, they're outside the top 200 in both respects. And for Samford, I do think that it's very big that you've had Jaden Booth be able to step up in a big way, shoot 70% free throw line, 40% per three with 18.5 points per game, and attempts 9.5 threes per game, because that's a team shooting less than 31% from 3-point range. You really don't have anyone else other than Zach Lamy on the roster that does shoot above 32% from three that sees meaningful minutes, but you do have Keaton and Caden Norris that have been able to combine for about 19.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and with Keaton Norris, 5 assists, only about 1.4 turnovers per game. Samford's not going to generate a lot of turnovers themselves outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and the way to beat the Samford team is by going bombs away from three. They are outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, overall 268th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. VMI even more deplorable though, 346th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is the Samford team that they are very much going to be content to go bombs away from 3-point range. They're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, and with VMI having the injuries that they've got in the backcourt, mainly once again to Bradley, that has left them very vulnerable, not just on offense, but in terms of guarding the 3-point line. They're allowing teams to shoot 37% from three, 304th in the country, and I think that allows Samford to be able to get the job done here. Set a total of a 152, so at a 151.5, I like the over. Would rather take a 151.5 over rather than a 152.5 under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 with Samford. 733, 734 on the card. Wright State hopes to be the right side as they are playing against UW Milwaukee. Milwaukee's an underdog of 5.5 to 6.5 points. 149.5 is the total line. I did set Wright State as a 6.5 point favorite, so 6 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Wright State. This has been traditionally a team that has not been very good on the defensive side of things. They have been much, much better this season, and they have slowed themselves down quite a bit as well. They're down to about 214th in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Wright State. They're a top 90 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Milwaukee, they're just getting gashed from the outside. Teams are shooting 36.4% from 3-point range against them. That goes up to over 38% in a road/neutral venue, and I do think that that's going to win out in this spot. Now, what Milwaukee has done a great job of is taking care of the ball. Top 70 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and this has been a mid-tempo team, hovering right around about 170th, 180th in terms of total possessions per game, but UW Milwaukee also outside the top 250 in terms of both their 2-point and their 3-point shooting percentages. Now, with UW Milwaukee, much like a season ago, they've been able to do an absolutely supreme job in terms of being able to grab second and third chances. They are averaging over 14 offensive rebounds per game. If you look at percentage of missed shots that do become an offensive rebound, this team is 61st in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, with Wright State, they're more around about 196th, but for UW Milwaukee, Seth Hubbard has had to be the head of the sink for the team with about 16.5 points per contest, but he has been missing over the last few weeks, so that means that you've had to have in the backcourt Amar Ulyagard along Josh Dixon step up. They combine for about 20.5 points, and both shooting the low 30s from 3-point range. Danilo Janovic down low has been rock solid, 12.5 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists, actually shoots 45.5% for three, albeit on very, very low volume. And then Stevie Elam, he's been a solid scorer with about 8.5 points per game, but he's another guy that's dealing with injuries as well. So with a banged up UW Milwaukee backcourt, I do think that is going to allow Wright State for one to be able to generate a few more turnovers. Wright State has been pretty solid with this regard. They've become a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That's a lot of teams only shoot about 30 41% from three-point range, being 85th in the country with that regard. Michael Emerbaje has been able to give you 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, and you don't have a ton of rebounding with this Wright St team, but they have been functional with this regard. They're inside the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage, and they've been about 100th with their own two-point shooting percentage, with Michael Cooper, a freshman, give you 15.5 points, 3 assists, shooting 37% from 3 in the backcourt, and then Solomon Caglin has been able to step up. He gives you only about 8.5 points per game, but from three-point range, he shoots 38% from the outside, and is coming off of a nice 20-point performance against Oakland. So with Wright State, I'm going to be one to lay the number against UW Milwaukee up to 6. I did set my total at a 152.5. I do think that this game is going to be close enough for late game felling, and Wright State exploits that bad at UW Milwaukee three-point shooting defense. So in on the over, and willing to lay with Wright State. 735, 736 on the card. It is Oral Roberts on the road against North Dakota. North Dakota is a 1.5 point favorite to a pick'em total on this game, 150 to 150.5. Set a total of 148.5. I'm in on the under, mainly because with this Oral Roberts team, they're just not doing a great job in terms of taking care of the ball. Oral Roberts is a mid-tempo team. They're about 173rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and North Dakota has slowed themselves down a little bit more from past seasons as well, about 131st. And for North Dakota, nothing special with this defense, right around about 272nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do one thing well. They are 39th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and with this Oral Roberts bunch, they are turning the ball over darn near 15 times per game. They are outside the top 325 in terms of ball security. Now, you do have Ty Harper coming over from Youngstown St, who's been able to supply 17 points, 2.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but for Oral Roberts, they shoot about 33.5% from 3, just outside the top 200 nationally with that regard. You'd expect that to be a little bit better. They're outside the top 290 with their own two-point shooting percentage as well, and this is an Oral Roberts defense that is also getting sure well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for North Dakota, this has been a team that has had a tough time getting going on offense. They are outside the top 300 with their three-point shooting percentage, or outside the top 250 with their two-point shooting percentage. Not necessarily doing a great job in terms of grabbing second and third chances, 291st in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. But for Oral Roberts, you don't necessarily have a lot of guys that are doing a great job down low either. Now, I do like the versatile big man in year 2, Yamanachi Williams, who's been able to give you 5 boards, 7.5 points per game at Portland 2 years ago, shooting in the mid-30s for 3, but the only other player that gives you over 3 rebounds per game is Afri Nave, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, Grayson Ullman for this North Dakota team has been able to supply about 12.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and for North Dakota, they've done an okay job taking care of the ball. They're a top 150 team in terms of VS turnovers on a per possession basis, and they've been solid on the defensive glass. They have been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're getting bludgeoned down low. North Dakota is well outside the top 300 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but with the way that they're able to generate turnovers, and with this being a home spot for North Dakota, I do think that they get the job done here. So North Dakota is a 4.5 point favorite, so with them being a pickup / 1.5 point favorite, going to be one to lay it. I do think that the turnovers cost you an over as well, so I total 148.5. I like the under. 737, 738 on the card. Northern Kentucky is playing goes to IU Indy, and IU Indy finds themselves at a sizable underdogs here of 13.5 to 14 points. 177.5 to 178.5 is the total, and I set my total at 171.5. I'm in on the under. Now, IU Indy is playing at a harebrained and absolutely crazy pace right now. They are number 3 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They've been slowed down recently, though, and this is an IU Indy team that I think, for lack of a better term, they're just getting figured out in terms of their offense, and teams have been able to exploit that. Like, you just take a look at what IU Indy has done recently. They did put up the 86 spot against Cleveland State, but Cleveland State just absolutely deplorable, to say the least. But against D1 competition and D1 competition only, this team has been held to 78 points or fewer in now each of their last 4 games. So I do think that this total has gone a little bit too lofty. Kyler DiAgostino, 17 points per game for this IU Indy team, and IU Indy, they're a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3, and they shoot 31.1% from 3-point range. IU Indy has been a top 80 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they do face off against a Northern Kentucky team that has been a little bit hit or miss with regards to their ball security, but with Northern Kentucky, this is also a top 25 team in terms of generating turnovers themselves. So I do think that you get a lot of sloppy possessions. Big reason why I set a total of 171.5. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got Dan Gradsinger for this Northern Kentucky team supplying 16.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3 at 34.5%, and Khalil Robinson shoots 47% from 3, 16 points per game. Donovan Ode, 15.5 points, 4 boards. He's been a little bit of a do-it-all guy. It is a very top-heavy Northern Kentucky team. You've got essentially 6 different guys that play 25-plus minutes, and then after that, you just don't really have much else. And then LJ Wells gives you 8 rebounds per game, and typically for this Northern Kentucky team, they're a team that is a little bit hit or miss with regards to their low post play outside the top 200 with regards to opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but IU Indy just has no size whatsoever. They should be able to dominate the boards in this game, especially Northern Kentucky being a top 125 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and they execute well inside. Northern Kentucky has been a top 80 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. I think that both teams are going to be turning the ball over left and right in this spot, so my total 171.5. I'm in on the under, and with IU Indy, I set them as a 15.5 point underdog, so we'll lay the 13.5 to 14 here with Northern Kentucky. 7:39 and 7:40 on the card. It is Purdue Fort Wayne playing host to UW Green Bay. Green Bay is a 7.5 point underdog to announce game, 149.5 to a 150.5, and with Green Bay, I set them as a 9.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it. You've got a Green Bay team that is playing very slow and controlled. Meanwhile, with this Purdue Fort Wayne team, they're not necessarily like warp speed fast, but they're certainly looking to push some tempo. 118th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, while UW Green Bay, they are 330th, but with UW Green Bay, for one, they don't give themselves any sort of second chances. 355th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, Purdue Fort Wayne is actually even worse at 360th, but with UW Green Bay not forcing the issue whatsoever in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 362nd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Purdue Fort Wayne, this is a team that very much prides themselves on being able to win the turnover battle. They are 46th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense. On offense, they've been a little bit more careless with the ball than they have been in past years because they had to replace much of their backcourt, but still, they are 39th in the country in terms of being able to take care of the ball. I do think that that's going to be able to win out in this spot for Fort Wayne. Bet a little bit of mix and match for them with regards to their guards, but Mikkel Stevenson, who comes on over from the SWAC, he has stepped up with about 15 points per game, and then DeAndre 3000 Craig along Corey Hadnot, they combine for about 35.5 points per game. They both shoot about 37% from three. Between Stevenson, Hadnot, and Craig, you've been able to get just under 9 assists per game, and with this Fort Wayne team, they're always going to be rough on the glass, but again, with UW Green Bay, what are you getting from them down low? As UW Green Bay has a nice go-to scorer in Marcus Hall, who's been really their do-it-all dynamo player. He's been supplying 14.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and there was a time where LeBron Thomas, it felt like, was really finding his footing, but he seems to be in the doghouse of Doug Gottlieb. Now you've got CJ O'Hara, who's been able to supply about 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but you look up and down at this UW Green Bay team, among their players that see meaningful minutes, only Miran Cisic is standing above 6'6", and he's a 7-footer that gives you 3 points, 2.5 rebounds per game, and not even he has been seeing a lot of minutes this year, so that's a bit of an issue. You've got a Green Bay team that shoots 33% from three-point range, but they're one of the better three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball at home. Away from home, they shoot less than 31% from the outside. You've got a Fort Wayne team that they've been pretty solid with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. They're shooting about 34% from the outside, and that sets up their 2-point shooting. As for Fort Wayne, they are a top 75 team as well in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, so I do think that they're going to be able to take advantage of a UW Green Bay team that honestly has not been the world's worst team in terms of being able to guard the perimeter, but this is a team that's just so badly getting gashed inside that I do think that Fort Wayne is going to be able to exploit that. As a matter of fact, for UW Green Bay, right now checking in 331st with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that the lack of efficiency on this UW Green Bay defense helps you out with the over. So my total 153.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with Fort Wayne. 741, 742 on the card. Cal Baptist is on the road against UT Arlington. Arlington is a slim home underdog of 1.5 points. 135.5 is the total. I set a total here of 134.5. I do like the under with UT Arlington. This team has really slowed down their tempo for past years, and they're just not taking care of the ball. UT Arlington outside the top 325 in terms of ball security, and they're now 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Cal Baptist, relatively mid-tempo team at 217th, but with UT Arlington, where their bread has been buttered thus far this season, has been generating for themselves second and third chances in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. This team does rank in the top 40 nationally, but for Cal Baptist, they are not allowing much of anything of that. 37th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage in road/court games. Teams are only grabbing 22.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is a top 20 mark in all of college basketball, and for UT Arlington, they had to replace pretty much everything from a season ago, aside from Rayshawn Semester, and Semester has been your top scorer this year, 14 points, 7 boards, not a guy that's really going to light you up from three, and UT Arlington is shooting 29.5% from three-point range. That is outside the top 340 nationally, and for Cal Baptist, they're another team that's outside the top 280 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage, but you've got Dominique Daniels, who's been able to supply 20-plus points per game, and then you've got a pair of guys in Thomas Endong along with Brady Henjai, who aren't going to give you a lot of scoring, but these two guys have great size, especially Henjai, who stands 7 feet tall, and these two guys have been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 14 or so rebounds per game, so they do a nice job locking it down with that regard. And On the flip side of things, for UT Arlington, you've been able to get some mixing and matching in the backcourt. You've had Marcel McCreary do a nice job being able to step up, and he's one of the few guys that's able to pop it from 34.5% three-point shooter, 12.5 points per game. And then you've had Casimir Chavis be able to supply about 9 points per contest as well. And it's really by committee with UT Arlington with the rebounding outside semester. Only one guy, Cameron Jackson, gives you over 4.8 rebounds per game. But also for this UT Arlington team, I think that there's a regression to the fact that they're allowing teams to shoot only 24.5% from three-point. Don't get me wrong, very good perimeter defense, but I don't think that that's going to be a mainstay, and this is how he does it. Martell Williams, 36% three-point shooter, 15 points per game. Outside of Williams and Daniels, a lot of guys for this Cal Baptist team just mix and shake with like 5 points per game. They've got relatively good depth, and I do think that defense does win out in this spot for Cal Baptist. So I did set a total here of a 134.5. I'm in on the under, and with this Cal Baptist team, I'm going to be willing to lay it, as I did make them a favorite of 4.5 points. 743, 744 on the card. It is Illinois State, and they play us to Evansville, and the Purple Aces find themselves as a big size underdog here of 15.5 to 14.5 points. 144.5 to 145.5 is the total, and with Illinois State, I did set them as a 17.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This Evansville team just simply has not been good offensively. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You do have a pair of teams that are not really going to be pushing a ton of tempo with Illinois State. This is a very mid-tempo team, about 240th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Evansville, they're more around about 247, so neither of these teams are like a snail's pace slow, but certainly not necessarily looking to push a lot of tempo. And then for Evansville as well, they're just absolutely terrible at guarding the three-point arc. 345th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, mainly because they're built around low-post presence, as you've got a guy in Joshua Hughes who's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with 9.5 points, 5.5 boards. Actually, has been able to pop it at about a 44% clip from three-point range, and then A.J. Casey, Connor Turnbull, these two guys combined for about 23 points per game, and both guys are able to shoot it from three. Both guys shoot less than 30% from the outside. I know that Turnbull's dealt with a little bit of an injury, but should be good to go in this game, and he's been their main shot blocker with about 3 blocks per game. For Evansville, their main forte is down low, top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 125 team in terms of block shot rate as well, but for Illinois State, they should be able to exploit this bad Evansville, shall we say, perimeter offense and perimeter defense. As for this Illinois State team, Johnny Kinzinger seems to be finding him once again, 12.5 points per game, still only shooting about 36% from three, down from where he was a season ago, but the ancillary guys, Tariq Coleman and Bowden Skunberg, combined for 21 points per game. They both shoot above 44.5% from three-point range, and for Illinois State, the team has been relatively solid in terms of rebounding by committee. They don't necessarily grab a lot of second and third chances themselves. They're outside the top 225 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots. They're resulting in an offensive rebound, but they're not allowing opponents to be able to grab a lot of second and third chances as well. For Illinois State, right now they are checking in about 24th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. At home, teams are only grabbing 17.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Throwing their Chase Walker, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and he's like the only guy other than Brandon Lieb, a true 7-footer who comes over from Illinois, give you over 5 rebounds per game. I do think that Illinois State is going to be able to win the battle down low. I do think that they're going to take it to an Evansville team that just has not been good at being able to guard the three-point line. I did set my total as a result at a 145.5. Illinois State has been quite efficient in terms of taking care of the ball, so I do think that they're going to be able to get a solid amount of points up on the board at a 145 or less and on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Illinois State. Made them the 17.5 point favorite. 745, 746 on the card. It is Valparaiso on the road against Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is a favorite here of 7.5 to 8.5 points, and total is 144.5, and I set the total at a 146.5. I do like the over. For Valparaiso, they're just rough with their shooting. They're outside the top 315 in terms of their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Valparaiso's actually been solid in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances away from home. They've been a top 150 team in terms of road defensive rebound percentage, and to the credit of Valparaiso, they do a nice job in terms of trying to maximize their possessions. They're a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they go up against a Southern Illinois team that's only 345th in terms of their own 3-point shooting percentage, but they're about 165th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, mainly because Southern Illinois does not take a lot of threes. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the 3-point line, and you've had a Southern Illinois team that's had a few issues in terms of taking care of the ball, but for Southern Illinois, they've been able to do a nice job down low as they're 74th in the country with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but if you look at what they're doing specifically at home, they're a top 15 team with regards to that 2-point shooting shooting percentage. And for Southern Illinois, you've got LGB Square doing a nice job for this team, as you've had Prince LGB along with his, I believe, brother and Rollins LGB, who've been able to combine for 12.5 rebounds per game. They both give you between 8.5 and 9.5 points per game. Only one double-figure score here for Southern Illinois and Colorado House, who's been able to supply 14.5 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, 2.5 per contest for a Southern Illinois team that, while they've had a tough time taking care of the ball, they've been a top 135 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're doing a good job with their percentages. They're a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. For Southern Illinois, they have been a top 125 team in terms of their overall rebounding, and you've got a Valparaiso team that, to their credit, they've been able to do a nice job defensively. They're clocking in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in that neighborhood about 123rd, but they are surrendering 20.1 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. And for Valparaiso, it's very much a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of approach with regards to scoring, as O&D's right now leads away with 12 points per contest. You've got Raheem Cherry throwing in there right around about 11 points per game, and Rakeem Cheney is able to give you about 3 assists, 1.6 steals per contest, while he's been able to shoot about 41% from 3. And even though both Cheney and D's shoot over 39% from 3, team as a whole shoots only 29.5% from the outside. They're the pretty much lone two guys on the roster that shoot above 30% from 3-point range. From there, you do have guys like Sean Tapula, Brody Whitaker, who are combining to give you about 15 points per game between the two of them. But I do think that in the end, Southern Illinois going to do a great job down low against the Valparaiso team that is outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and that's a big reason why I did set my line at 12.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Southern Illinois, and Southern Illinois really looking to push quite a bit of tempo this year as well. In year number 2 under Scott Nagy, 51st in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 146.5. I'm in on the over, 747, 748 on the card. Portland State is going to be on the road against Weber State, and Weber State is a underdog of 1.5 points, 149.5 is the total. So Weber State is a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them outright on the money line. You've got a Weber State team that's been able to do a nice job in terms of limiting second and third chances when they've been at home. They are currently 83rd in terms of defensive rebound percentage at home. Teams are only grabbing 22.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and that's big against a Portland State team that is not taking care of the ball. Portland State 319th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're a relatively mid-tempo team, 135th in terms of total possessions per game. Weber State is more around about 87, so this Weber State team is very much looking to push a little bit of tempo, and for Weber State, they've been a top 125 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage at home, but this is a team that they really maximize their 3-point shooting over 39.5% from 3-point range in their home games. Meanwhile, you've got a Portland State team that is very content to pile drive the ball down low, but they've got some big home and road splits. They're shooting about 65% from 2-point range at home in a road/shoot court environment. That goes down to about 48.3%, and while this bunch does a relatively solid job in terms of grabbing second and third chances, Portland State, a top 185 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, put them in a road/shoot court environment that ascends to the top 135. They really are a little bit top-heavy with regards to that backcourt. You've got two guys that have really been able to flourish. Terry Miller, 17.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's shooting 44% from 3. Jalen Henderson, not popping it well from 3, but 17 points, 6 assists per game. But between the two of them, 6.5 turnovers per game. Now, to the credit of Portland State, top 110 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they do a remarkable job of keeping teams off the free throw line. They're actually a top 35 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. That said, this is also a Portland State team that has been having a little bit of an issue in terms of just being able to get their own 2-point shots to be able to drop, as well with them dropping below 50% away from home. Trayvon Minute has been able to give you 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Keon Kenzie has been able to throw in there a little bit over 7 boards. He's also given you 11.5 points per game as well. And for Weber State, this has been a team that in the past has been really centered around like one specific guy or two specific guys. It's a much more, shall we say, of a collective this season, as you now have 7 different guys, if you include Vitaj Vartinen, who's been dealing with an injury over the last 5 or 6 games, that are all able to give you at least 8 points per contest, as you've got Malik Oma down low, give you about 8.7 rebounds per game. Edwin Suarez, 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Jace Whiting has been that main 3-point shooter at 39%, 13 points per game. Trevor Henning has been able to give you 13 points. He's shooting well from 3, and Weber State is not allowing teams to be able to get good looks from 3. They are allowing teams to shoot less than 28% from 3, top 30 mark in all of college basketball. And with the way that Weber State has been able to do a nice job with regards to rebounding at home, I do think that they find a way to get the job done here. I said Weber State is a 6.5 point favorite, so I like them on the money line. Made a total of 148.5. I think that the sloppiness costs you an over, so in on the under and in on Weber State on the money line. 749, 750 on the card. Chattanooga is going to be on the road against UNC Greensboro. Greensboro is a home underdog of 1.5 points. 146.5 is the total, and I did set a total here of a 142.5. I do like the under for UNC Greensboro. For some reason, they've really sped up their tempo this year, and Chattanooga has really slowed down their tempo. Chattanooga, not necessarily the most breakneck pace team in the world to start with, but now 325th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Greensboro is actually up to 171st, but we've seen Greensboro play at a rate of about 5 possessions per game fewer in their last 3 games, so they are looking to slow things down mainly because they don't have the personnel to play up tempo. Relatively okay 3-point shooting team, Greensboro, but country average Aaron Justin Neely, 15 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. He's been a do-it-all sort of player for this team, but outside of what you're able to get out of him, it's just a lot of, shall we say, suspectness, especially with this Greensboro team down low being outside the top 170 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, or outside the top 200 in terms of overall rebound percentage as well. They're not blocking a lot of shots. You've got Donald White Jr., who's been able to supply about 12 points per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, and Lillian Marvel has been a marvel, shooting 53% from 3-point with about 10.5 points per game. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be too much of a mainstay for Chattanooga. Typically, this is a team that is very good on the offensive side of things and leaves something to be desired defensively, and Chattanooga just not going to grab a lot of second and third chances. Right now, they are 356th in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but even with not grabbing a lot of second and third chances, a top 190 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Greensboro team that certainly is not that. They are more around about 236th, and at home that actually falls outside the top 250. Chattanooga, contrary to popular belief, because they always bomb a lot of shots from 3, they're actually a little bit more efficient with their 2-point shooting. They're a top 125 team with this regard, and for Chattanooga, they've had to do a lot of mixing, matching with their team as they bring in Teddy Washington from Southeast Missouri. He's been a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 10 points, 3.5 boards, pair of assists, a steal per contest. Jordan Frinson is actually your lone double-figure scorer. Shoots 44% from 3, 15 points per game. At Chattanooga, a solid but not amazing 3-point shooting team at about 35.1% from the outside. With Chattanooga, they do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 270 in terms of generating turnovers on defense, and they've been able to do an okay job with their defense. They've become a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so set Chattanooga as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 142.5, 751, 752 on the card. It is Morehead St. They hit the road to face off against Lindenwood, and Lindenwood is a favorite of 7.5 points, 148.5 is the total, and set a total here of a 143.5. I do like the under. Morehead St has been playing much more up-tempo than they have in the past. They're up to about 122nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I think that they're going to get back to their roots, play a little bit more slow and controlled, and Lindenwood is absolutely gunning it themselves. They are currently 25th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but even though you're getting a lot of possessions in these Lindenwood games, you're not getting a lot of clean possessions. Lindenwood has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They, meanwhile, are about 206th in terms of their ball security, and Morehead St has been turning the ball over left and right. Morehead St 313th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a Morehead St team that has been really looking to the main holdovers in the backcourt from past seasons, as typically this team is built down low, but they've lost pretty much all their forwards from a season ago. You've only got one guy that's able to give you over 5 rebounds per game. That'd be John Carroll, caroling all the way to give you 9.7 rebounds per game, but you've had George Marshall do a nice job with about 12 points, 4.5 boards, bit of Sachi suffer with a steal and a half per contest. Shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Davion Cunningham is that main scorer, 12.5 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3 as well, and Joshua Legree has actually shot 47% from 3 for Morehead St team. That's right around country average with their 3-point shooting percentage, but for Morehead St, they have been vulnerable on the inside, outside the top 240 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and that's big for a Lindenwood team that last year was dead stinking last in all of college basketball with their 3-point shooting percentage. A little bit better this year, but still outside the top 300 at about 30.7%, but they do a nice job pile driving the ball down low. Jadis Jones give you 16 points, 8 boards. He shoots over 66% from the floor. Enes Fattrell along Dontrez Williams. These two guys actually do shoot it well from 3. They're combined to shoot about 37% from the outside. Between the two of them, about 28 points, 10 rebounds per game, and between the two of them, you get about 4 steals per contest as well. Lindenwood has been able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc as well. They're a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and just the overall defense of Lindenwood has been able to improve. They do leave something to be desired on offense, while outside the top 200 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, but this is a Lindenwood team that is out in the top 135 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so I did set a total of a 143.5. I like the under end with Lindenwood. Set their best as a 7.5 point favorite. I think I saw a 7 a little bit earlier. If we can get down to a 7 or less, we'll lay it with Lindenwood to go along with that under. 753, 754 on the card. UT Martin is playing us to Western Illinois. Western Illinois, an underdog of 14.5 points, 137.5 is the total end. With UT Martin, I set them as a 14.5 point favorite. I'm right now seeing a 14 out there. That's a max I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. With this Tennessee Martin team, the big issue that this team has had is turnovers. They are outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Much of it has been due to the fact that they've had quite a few injuries. Drogas Lagnu, who's one of their main backcourt pieces with 14 points per game, he's been missing for 7 games. Filip Radkovic has been dealing with a little bit of injury as well, but it seems like he has a chance to be able to play in this game. You've got Matthias Danusis, who's pretty much the only out of their top 5 scorers, has yet to miss a game this year. Give you 14 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And for this UT Martin team, they're a top 55 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They need to clean up the fact that they shoot just 66.4% at the free throw line. But you've got a Western Illinois team that they've got all sorts of issues and a very slow style of play for Western Illinois in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they are checking in 271st in all of college basketball. And typically, you would think Western Illinois will play some solid defense. Currently 315th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while this UT Martin team, they're overall 116th, but if you take a look at what they're doing at home and home only, they have been a top 45 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, which is a bit of doomsday for a Western Illinois team that just frankly has not been able to get a lot going on offense either. This team is outside the top 280 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage and their free throw shooting percentage as well. That's not great, as Lucas Lorenzen is able to give you 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, but he shoots less than 30% from 3-point. Isaiah Griffin, the transfer from Idaho St, has been solid, about 10.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. But lone guy that gives you over 5 boards per contest for this team is Kiara Dixon, who's been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 8 points per game. And with this Western Illinois team, they're not necessarily a team that's going to force the issue. They're outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they are dead last in the country in terms of assists per game. So not a lot of facilitation in the backcourt. That should allow UT Martin to be able to get the job done. And I do think that UT Martin is going to exploit a Western Illinois team that has been very, very fragile along the perimeter. Set by total 138.5, so 138 or less in on the over, and a modal up to 14 with UT Martin. 755, 756 on the card. It is SIU Edwardsville, and they are going to be playing us to Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana is an underdog of 10.5 to 11.5 points. So on this game, it is 138.5, and with this Southern Indiana team, I did set them as a 9.5 point underdog. I'm willing to take anything of double figures with them, mainly because you do have an Edwardsville team that they are certainly not going to be looking to push tempo whatsoever. With Edwardsville, they're about 244th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Southern Indiana very much is going to be looking to 66th in the country, but we've seen them dial it back quite a bit. They're playing at a rate of about 7 possessions fewer per game over their last 3 games rather than the start of the season, and it's a respectable Southern Indiana defense. They're about 189th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, alongside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, while Edwardsville 101st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for this Evansville team, they have been dealing with quite a few injuries as they had to move on from their main scorer from a season ago in Rayshawn Taylor, who was a do-it-all sort of guy. Now they're really looking to ring Malaith, being able to do it all at about 6'9", 17.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. And Jack Champion, who actually was over at Southern Indiana last season, 4.5 assists, 7.5 points per game. Not necessarily too much of a scorer, but he's able to help flow some good, clean offense for a SIU Edwardsville team that's well outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Flat out because they're outside the top 200 in terms of 2-point, 3-point, and free throw shooting percentage. They don't turn the ball over a lot, though. Edwardsville, a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on per possession basis, a top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball. In Southern Indiana, not taking care of the ball. They are well outside the top 150 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and they are outside the top 340 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. But Ismail Habib has been able to supply 18 points, 3 assists, and he's shooting 37.5% from 3. Team as a whole is only shooting about 32% from 3, well outside the top 225 nationally. But now you've got Tolu Samuels down low, give you about 8.5 boards, 6 points per game. Cordell Bailey has stepped up with about 6.5 boards, 14.5 points per game. And for Southern Indiana, they've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That's very big because this SIU Edwardsville team, year in and year out, they're a team that very much is very content to be pile driving the ball down low. With SIU Edwardsville, they once again find themselves in the top 100 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. So I do think that you're going to get a little bit of a slog of a game here. I did set my total at a 135.5, so I'm in on the under and at 10 plus, taking those points with Southern Indiana. 757, 758 on the card. Southern Miss is going to be on the road against Louisiana Monroe. Monroe is a home underdog of 8.5 points. 156.5 is the total, and I set my total at 147.5. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got a Southern Miss team that is looking to be relatively mid-tempo, and Louisiana Monroe is cranking up that tempo a little bit for Monroe in terms of total total possessions per game. They are about 86th in all of college basketball, not necessarily putting the ball home and outside the top 280 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and a wretched 337th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Southern Miss, a little bit rough on defense, 236th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I did make them a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it, mainly because I do think that this Southern Miss team is going to do an absolutely tremendous job of being able to dominate the boards. Right now for Southern Miss, top 100 team in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound, and if you just separate it out between home and neutral court games, they're actually a top 35 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. And while Southern Miss is a little bit top heavy, those two top scorers have been very good, as you've had Tawilk Weeks, who's been able to supply 17.5 points, 6 boards, doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3-point range either does Isaac Tavares, but for Tavares, 16 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, a little bit over 2 steals per contest. This is a Southern Miss team that has been a top 225 team with regards to both opponents' 2-point shooting percentage and turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for this Monroe bunch, they're now under the tutelage of Phil Cunningham, who he was the coach over at Troy for many years, and it's been a little bit rough for them outside of Montavious Russell. Russell comes over from Mississippi State, and he's been rock solid. 17 points, shoots 39.5% from 3. In recent games, Christian Lewis has been able to come along for the ride with about 3 assists, steal and a half per contest, 16.5 points per game, and 4 with Russell and Lewis combined for about 3 steals per contest. But for Monroe, they're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. They're not shooting country average in terms of their 3-point shooting, but in their 2-point shooting percentage, they're outside the top 300 there. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, to the credit of Monroe, they're not going to put you on the free throw line, top 50 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, but they aren't giving themselves any sort of second chances as well. They're outside the top 335 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. With Southern Miss being able to dominate the boards, I do think that they get the job done. So my line at 9.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Southern Miss, and I'm going to be in on the under semi-total at 147.5, 759, 760 on the card. UC Irvine's outside for the Anteaters. They are going to be on the road against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners, who are between 8.5 and 10.5 point home underdogs. So on this game is 140.5, and I said Irvine is a 10.5 point favorite. So at 10 or less, I'm willing to lay it. Bakersfield just not executing at all on offense in any sort of facet with regards to their offense, because this is a Bakersfield team that is very much content to pile drive the ball down low, and both of these teams are not going to be looking to take any threes whatsoever. For Irvine, they're at 31st in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. Bakersfield is actually 18th, and neither of these teams are shooting the ball very well, as Irvine is 307th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Bakersfield is 312th, but here's the thing. Irvine is a top 12 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, and you've got a Bakersfield team that for some reason has decided that they're going to be cranking up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They now find themselves in the top 70 in all of college basketball, and with this Bakersfield team, they are turning the ball over darn near 15 times per contest. So it's not great to say the least. You do have an Irvine team that has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, outside the top 225 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. That's a little bit unlike them, but Kyle Evans should be able to own things down low, 12 points, 3 blocks per contest, and then you've got 2 nice go-to scorers in Jerion Dixon and Darren Saurin in the backcourt. They've been able to combine for 28 points per game, and with Dixon, he shoots 38.5% from 3-point range. Saurin, more of that facilitator, 4.4 assists and 1.4 steals per contest, and Irvine, much better at being able to take care of the ball rather than Bakersfield. They're about country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and for Irvine, they are really good down low. They're a top 3 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and again, with this Bakersfield team looking to pile drive the ball down low, that's not necessarily great. Now, I do like for Bakersfield, Ron Jessamy. He comes down over from Tennessee State. He's been able to fly about 12 points, block and a half, actually 2.5 blocks, and a steal and a half per contest, but shoots 25% from 3, and for this Bakersfield team, you've only got 2 of your top 8 scorers shooting above 30.8% from 3-point range, with CJ Hardy shooting 35.5% from 3, 14.5 points per game. Tom Mark, he's been able to shoot about 38% from the outside with about 6.5 points per game, but the overall sloppiness, even with having Dalen Smith give you 16 points per game, I think is going to be very costly in this case. I did set a total of a 138.5. I think that you get a lot of possessions, but a lot of dead possessions, so one to lay up to 10 with Irvine, and I'm going to be in on the under. 761, 762 on the card. UC Davis is playing us to CSUN. Cal State Northridge is a underdog here of 3.5 to 4.5 points, so on this game it is 163.5 to 164.5, and with UC Davis. I did set them as a favorite of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, for UC Davis, this is a team that's having a very difficult time in terms of taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and we saw CSUN come off of Christmas break and really do a nice job of putting a charge into Samford. But for this CSUN team, they're a team that has been very hit or miss with regards to their home and road splits. This is a CSUN team that's actually a top 30 team with their 2-point shooting percentage when they're at home. When they're away from home, they're well outside the top 235 with that regard. So they do see a little bit of a diminishment with regards to their offense when they're away from home. And this is a CSUN team that, make no mistake about it, they're going to be looking to gun it once again. They're 34th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And UC Davis, much more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 182nd in all of college basketball. And for UC Davis, they've done a really good job down low. They're 38th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, leaving a whole heck of a lot of something to be desired with regards to their 3-point shooting, as right now they are shooting about 31.9% from 3-point, which actually ascends to about 36.5% from 3-point range at home. But I do think that they're going to be able to exploit a CSUN team that just, it feels like they do play a little bit too fast for their own good because they are turning the ball over 13.5 times per contest outside the top 250 in terms of that ball security. And for CSUN, they are currently relying upon Larry Hughes to be able to generate a lot of offense, 19 points per game, and he's shooting 44% from 3-point range. He is the only other top 4 scorers that shoots above 26% from the outside. Muhammad Fofana down low has been able to give you about 7 boards, 9.5 points per game, and then Josh O'Garrow, 9.5 boards, 3 assists, 14 points per game. He pretty much does everything other than pop it from 3. And CSUN, once again, back to being a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage, so they're going to have a nice edge there. But that said, they're not generating turnovers the same way that they did a season ago. Meanwhile, you do have a UC Davis team that's been still pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. This is a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. It's been Niles Cooper stepping up to give the team about 15 points per game. He shoots 37% from 3 and counter. Sevilla is their main sharpshooter, 44% 3-point shooter, 14 points per contest. It's mix and match down low for the team with having Niko Rokac, who's been able to give you about 5.3 rebounds per game. UC Davis is well outside the top 290 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but not too bad on the defensive glass, and they've been a top 225 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Big with CSUN being a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. I think that that'll be just enough to be able to keep the scoring down, so I did set my line at a 162 with regards to the total, in on the under, and with UC Davis, I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. 763, 764 on the card. Omaha set hike. They are on the road. They are facing off against South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits are an 8.5-point favorite. Total on scheme, it is 152.5, and I did set my line at 7, so at 7.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Omaha. Now, this is an Omaha team that's been ghastly with regards to their defense. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, mainly because they just don't have a lot of rebounding. Right now, this is a Omaha team that's outside the top 175 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, hovering right around about 300th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well, but they do have a solid backcourt. Lance Waddles, Tony Osborne, these two guys combined for 32 points per game, and Waddles is shooting 46% from 3, so he's waddling his way to really giving you some nice production. And then you've been able to get a lot of Jashawn Glover. He's been able to give you 11.5 points per game, 5 boards, 3.3 assists. Now, he's been banged up, and he hasn't necessarily been a guy that's really launched it from 3-point range, but now you've got Paul Jobet, who he was missing for about the first 10 or so games of the season, has come in the last 2 games that has provided a combined 29 points, and I feel like he's going a little bit under the radar in the betting market, so I do think that him coming over after he was actually from the country of France, I think that that's a big ad for them. And you've got a South Dakota State team that, as per usual, they're doing a nice job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. For South Dakota State, this is not the same 3-point shooting team that we've seen in the past. They're only about 176th in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, so it actually goes up a little bit north of 42% when they're at home. You've been able to get some good production out of the 6'7" combo player and Matthew Morris, who's able to give you 7 points per game. I remember last year he was a really good 3-point shooter, hasn't done much of that this year, but you still have Kellen Gary along Trey Buchanan, combined shoot about 44% from the outside between the two of them, 18.5 points per game. Jaden Jackson, he's been able to give you 13 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and for South Dakota State, they're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that do not result in an offensive rebound, so they do a nice job on the glass. They have been a little bit vulnerable inside, though. They're right around about 200th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves about a country average team with their own 2-point shooting percentage and not grabbing a ton of second and third chances, so I do think that that's going to be just enough for Omaha to be able to hold in there in a game that I think is going to be seeing a little bit of pace, but not necessarily a warp speed pace. South Dakota State has slowed it down to around 30th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Omaha's more around about 187, so I did set a total here of a 153. Right now, we're sitting at a 152.5. That's my absolute max buy point on the over end. With Omaha willing to take the 8.5 points, set them as a 7-point dog. 765, 766 on the card. It is Tennessee Tech on the road against Little Rock. Little Rock, a very slim favorite of 1.5 points. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total end. With Little Rock, I did set them as a underdog of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to take Tennessee Tech on the money line. This is a Little Rock team that I'm just really not impressed by at all. You've got a Tennessee Tech team that I recognize that their defense is not great. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But Little Rock, they're looking to slow things down. 294th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. 329th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. And 322nd in terms of overall points allowed on a per possession basis. This Little Rock team is just really not getting a lot right. And additionally, when you take a look at the offensive side of things for Little Rock, this is one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. 361st in all of college basketball. Now, what Little Rock does have going for them is that they might have the best overall scorer in this game is Chandler Lawson, who began his career over at Memphis and I believe one or two other D1 schools, and he's been able to do nice shots, supplying 15.5 points, 3.8 assists per game. And Cameron Walls has come along for the ride. He's giving you about 13.5 points per game for a Little Rock team that does shoot 37% from three. Problem is they have a tough time being able to get those shots as they're a bottom 25 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, and all the turnovers do cost them there. And additionally, for this Little Rock team, when they go to the free throw line, they shoot 61% the free throw line. So in a nip and tuck game, that is probably going to nip them in the tuckus. Meanwhile, you do have a Tennessee Tech team that they do have a lot of issues, but this is a team that does rank in the top 130 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And with Little Rock taking so many shots from inside the arc, that should be able to win out here. Judge Juwan Nichols, along with Makai Cameron, have been able to combine for 22 points per game. And Cameron shoots 36.5% from three-point range, with Nichols about 4.7 rebounds per game. This is a Tennessee Tech team that's not going to generate for themselves a lot of second and third chances. This team is outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but top 125 team with regards to their overall 2-point shooting percentage. Danny Pounds has been your main man with about 12 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 50% from three, albeit on very, very low volume, but CJ McPherson, I think, has a little bit of upside as well, about 5.5 points per game, and has been able to give the team a little bit more from the outside recently as well, shooting about 36% from 3 points. Just with all the sloppiness of Little Rock, I do think that Tennessee Tech finds a way to get the job done. Little Rock outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions per game. Tennessee Tech more around about 95th. I did set my total at a 145 because I do think that you're going to get a lot of sloppy possessions here, so I'm going to be in on this 145.5 plus under, and I'm willing to take Tennessee Tech on the money line. 767, 768 on the card. Northern Arizona is on the road against Montana. Montana is a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite, and your total on this game is 148.5 to 149.5, and I did set this total at a 146, so I do like the under. You've got a Montana team that's looking to push a lot of tempo, and you've got a Northern Arizona team that's not really looking to push a lot of tempo. For Montana, they have ascended all the way to being number 37 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and are doing a better job of generating turnovers. Meanwhile, for Northern Arizona, more around about 246th in all of college basketball, and with this Northern Arizona team, they've been having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, about 221st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got this Montana team right now at 334th, so lots of dead possessions being involved in Montana games, but even with that, I did set the Grizzlies as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, mainly because you've got money on your side for Montana. Money Williams with 18.2 points, 5.8 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point, and then lots of guys like Tyler Thompson, Tajon Sawyer, Brooklyn X, Tyler Isaac, who all give you between 9 to 9.6 points per game. Other than Thompson, you really don't have a lot of 3-point shooting there. Montana's overall shooting about 35% from 3-point, and Montana not giving you any sort of second and third chances outside the top 330 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And typically the main forte of this Northern Arizona team is being able to prevent second and third chances, and while they're still doing a solid job of being able to do that, it's not like this Montana team is relying upon those second and third chances. And for Northern Arizona, they've actually fallen to 271st with regards to their defensive rebound percentage this season. As for Northern Arizona, they lost that main rebounder from a season ago in Carson Towne. They should still have a nice little bit of an edge on the glass, as they've got a 6'8", little bit of a do-it-all player in Zach Davidson, give you 15 points, 5 boards. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but Ryan Abelman, he is able to. He shoots 39% from 3 with about 12 points per game. And then Arnie Ojanik, along with Isaiah Shaw, they combine for 19.5 points per game, both shooting above 43% 73% from three-point range and over 80% of the free throw line. That's big because this Northern Arizona team in a nip and tuck spot, they shoot 64.1% of the free throw line. That is outside the top 340 nationally, and for Northern Arizona, they become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they also have fallen outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. This is a Montana team that does rank in the top 50 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, and with this Montana team having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, but doing a nice job in terms of their exterior play, I do think that they find a way to get the job done here. So Montana is a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and made that total a 146. I like the under. 769, 770 on the card. It is Bradley, and they're on the road against Belmont, and Belmont is a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite with a total of 151.5. Did set my total at 147. I do like the under. You've got a Bradley team that last year led all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage. You figured that was going to take a little bit of a drop-off, but now Bradley is doing an absolutely amazing job in terms of generating turnovers. They're now a top 30 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Belmont, they're actually doing a really nice job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They are a top 100 team in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that do not result in an offensive rebound. Bradley a little bit closer to about 144th with this regard, and Belmont, after they were well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they've actually become one of the more efficient mid-major defenses in all of college basketball, clocking in 41st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I did make them the 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Bradley pretty good in their own right with their defense, 65th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I also do like this total under with having Bradley, having Juwan Johnson headlining things with 18.5 points, shoots about 39.5% from three. Bradley's about a country average team, 34.1% three-point shooting. Alex Ubegerse, he's been able to give you 12 points. He's been able to shoot 39% from three-point range, and with this rebounding core, I mean, it's a whole lot greater than some of its Spurs approach. AJ Smith, he gives you 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. One guy on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, but then you've got essentially 5 different guys that give you between 3.9 and 4.4 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Belmont, they've got 2 guys that say between 6'6" and 6'8" that really lead the charge. That would be Tyler Lundblade and Sam Orme. Orme, 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 35% from 3. Lundblade doesn't really give you a lot of rebounding or anything, but 16.5 points, shoots 93% the free throw line, 42% from 3. And then Nick McClain, 6.5 assists of fewer than 3 turnovers per game, 11 points per game on 46% three-point shooting for Belmont. They're solid in terms of taking away the ball. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're just doing a really good job with their shooting percentages. Top 75 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. With this Belmont team, they're not going to generate for themselves a lot of second chances. They're outside the top 260 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. That resulted in an offensive rebound, but with them doing a nice job on the defensive glass, I do think that Belmont, even though they're still looking to play quite a bit up-tempo, you've got a Bradley team that's a little bit more mid-tempo at about 136th in terms of total possessions per game. Belmont 73rd. I think that the Belmont defense gets the job down here. Want to lay up Belmont, set them as a 7-point favorite, like the under set by total at a 147, 771, 772 on the card. It is Hawaii on the road against UC Riverside. Riverside is a underdog of 8.5 points, 150 to 150.5 is the total line for Hawaii. I did set them as a favorite of 7.5 points, so here at the 8.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with UC Riverside. Now, what Hawaii is doing a really good job of is defending on the road. They're a top 5 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a road/neutral court venue. Meanwhile, for Hawaii, this has been also a team that has really sped themselves up. They're up to 82nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You got a Riverside team that's more mid-tempo, about 168th in terms of total possessions per game, and Riverside lacking on defense. They're in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that they are going to be able to find some cracks in a Hawaii team that has been very reliant upon free throws to be able to generate their offense. Top 25 team in terms of percentage of their shots that do come from made free throws is a Riverside team that does an okay job of not putting you on the free throw line. Neither great nor bad. For Riverside, they just really lost the turnover battle outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers on defense. But Andrew Henderson, 17 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 37.5% from 3-point range. You've been able to get good production out of Mark Worthy, who's been able to dole out 3 assists, 14 points per game. Needs to clean up those 4 turnovers per game, but down low you've got Osiris Gary, who comes over from Utah Valley, give you about 7 rebounds per game, so love what he's been able to bring to the table for a Riverside team that they've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're not grabbing a lot of second and third chances themselves, and then with the Bows, you've been able to get a really good production out of the 7-footer Isaac Johnson, who's actually able to pop it from 3 at about 31% and shoots 91% the free throw line, 12.5 points, 7 rebounds per game by committee. Why he's one of the better better rebounding teams in all of college basketball, a top 50 team with regards to rebound percentages. Each of your top 4 scorers, Harry Ruyedev, Quandre Bullock, Johnson I mentioned before, and Gaitis Nemishka have all been able to give you at least 5.2 rebounds per game. Nemishka down with his scoring, only about 10 points per game, and Hawaii is not bombing it well from 3. 30.9% from the outside. That's outside the top 290 in all of college basketball, but they're allowing opponents to shoot less than 30% from 3, so they've held up relatively well there. And this is a Hawaii team that's also a top 25 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so it's a very interesting case here. For Hawaii, they're playing really good defense, but they're leaving something to be desired on offense, especially being outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis there. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I think that it results in a lower scoring game. So I tell 147.5. I like the under, and with the Riverside, I'm willing to take 8+ with them. 773, 774 on the card. Utah Valley is on the road against Tarleton St. Tarleton St finds themselves as a home underdog of 3.5 points. 149 after 150 is the total. So Utah Valley is a 4-point favorite. So 3.5 is the absolute maximum that I'm going to be willing to lay with Utah Valley, but I'm going to be willing to lay. This is a Utah Valley team that they just get up in you with regards to their defense, and this is a team that's looking to push a little bit of tempo. They're about 160th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Tarleton, they've traditionally been a little bit more of a controlled team because they are very much based around defense, but they're up to 81st in terms of total possessions per game. For Tarleton, they're about 140th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but if you look at them specifically at home, they have become a much more dominant defense. For Tarleton in terms of home games and home games alone, they are a top 30 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Utah Valley, they're overall 43rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and if you take a look at them in a road/neutral venue top 10 mark for Utah Valley, the big issue for them is turning the ball over. They turn the ball over about 14 times per contest outside the top 290 in terms of ball security, but you do have Trevon Leonard, who has been able to give out 7 assists per game, 10.5 points. He shoots 38% from 3. And Utah Valley's whole, they shoot about 35.3% from 3-point. Jackson Holcomb has been that go-to scorer, 16 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but Tyler Hendricks, he shoots 50% from 3. Starting to see a little bit of regression with that Utah Valley 3-point shooting, but in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, they rank in the top 50 in both regards. They're not necessarily going to force a ton of turnovers, and Tarleton St, they're back in the top 10 nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and after dealing with a little bit of injury, Dior Johnson is back. He's their top scorer, 20.5 points, shooting 56.5% from 3. We'll see a little bit of regression there, but they've been dealing with a lot of injuries with like DJ Dormu missing much of the season along with AJ Dent, and they've been mixing and matching as a result. Chris Mbakpa missed a little bit of time, but he's back, and he and Freddie Hicks have been able to combine for about 12 rebounds and in that neighborhood about 21 points per contest for this Tarleton State team. They've been able to do a pretty solid job on the glass as well. They become a top 150 team with regards to rebound percentage. I do think that this is going to be a very sloppy game with a lot of turnovers, but I do think that in the end, just with the way that Utah Valley is able to play such tough defense, they find a way to get the job done here. I did set my line at 4, so I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 here with Utah Valley, and even with the tempos, set my total 146, I'm in on the under. 775, 776 on the card. Utah Tech is on the road against Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian is a 5 to 5.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 136 after a 137, and with Abilene Christian, I set them as a favorite of 7.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, Utah Tech, much more respectable with their low post play than they have been in past seasons, and for Utah Tech, they're not the world's worst defensive team, 247th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so clearly still leaving something to be desired there, but this is also an Abilene Christian team that has in the past been one of the best in terms of generating turnovers in all of college basketball, and this team has actually been much better on the defensive glass. They become a top 100 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. This is still a team that is very solid in terms of generating turnovers, 27th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, not quite what it has been in past years, and Utah Tech, they're generating fewer turnovers than they have in past years. They're about 118th with this regard, and with Abilene Christian, I do think that it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be able to step up around their main scorer, as they've been able to get really good production out of Braden Hubbard, who's been able to supply 16 points, pair of assists per contest, only shoots about 32% from 3, but outside of that, you then have pretty much, I would say, 8 different guys that give you between 4 and 9.8 points per game. They dealt with a little bit of an injury to Yanel Rivera, but he should be good to go in this game. 10 points, shooting 39% from 3. He's their main go-to 3-point shooter. And then Rich Smith, 4.4 assists, 2.5 turnovers per game. Tarleton St outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, mainly because they don't take care of the ball. They've been turning the ball over more than 14 times per game. And then for Utah Tech, they're just not the same 3-point shooting team that they've been in the past. Now they bring in a transfer from Alabama and Georgia and Deshaun Holt, who's been able to give you 10 points per game. He shoots 44% from 3-point range, and Ethan Potter has really been able to help this team out down low, 16.5 points, 7 boards. He's not going to give you a lot from the outside, but for Utah Tech right now, they're shooting 31.1% from 3. That is outside the top 275 nationally. They become a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but with Utah Tech having some issues in terms of taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. I do think that allows Abilene Christian to be able to go out there and get the job done, and Abilene Christian in the past has been quite a bit more of an up-tempo team. We've seen them play quite a bit more slowly this year, as we have with Utah Tech. Utah Tech about 150th in terms of total possessions per game. Abilene Christian more around 263rd, but I do think that things crank up with regards to the tempo. I did set my total at 145.5 as a result. I do like the over of the Abilene Christian. I'm willing to lay up to 7 with them. 777, 778 on the card. Indiana State is going to be on the road against Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa is a favorite of 10.5 points total on this game, 131.5 to 133.5, and I do like the under. I set my total at a 131.5. You've got an Indiana State team that has been very sloppy with the ball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They are well outside the top 175, as a matter of fact, outside the top 275 with that regard, and you've got an Indiana State team that last year was really good with their three-point shooting, 297th in all of college basketball. Now you've got a Northern Iowa team that has been able to do a nice job with regards to that turnover battle. At home, they are 44th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, in terms of taking care of the ball, 30th in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and it's not like this Indiana State team is giving themselves second chances to score. Outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, Ian Scott, great Scott, he's shooting 48% for 3 with 14 points per game, and then Camp Wagner has been a 35.5% three-point shooter, 13 points, 5 rebounds per game, so I like what these guys are able to bring to the table, and then trio of guys between about 9 to 10 points per contest, Eric Voris, Sterling Young, along with Xavier Hall, but expected a little bit more than 31% three-point shooting out of Sterling Young, and then on the flip side of things, you've got a Northern Iowa team that has been able to get a lot of production out of Leon Bond. He actually began his career over at Virginia, and he's done a nice job being one of those main scorers with about 13 points per contest along Trey Campbell. Campbell, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, goes to his 13 points per game. Campbell shoots 36% for 3. Bond more in the neighborhood, about 44.2% from the outside, and one thing about Northern Iowa is that they will not give themselves second chances. They are well outside the top 350 in terms of percentage of their shots that become an offensive rebound, but for Northern Iowa, they also do a really good job with their percentages. Top 40 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, so even though they're going to take it on the chin on the glass outside the top 225 with that regard, with Leon Bond being the lone guy on the roster other than Tristan Smith, who's giving you more than 4.3 rebounds per game. For Smith, 5.7 boards, pair of assists, 10 points per game. I do think that they're going to do a nice job controlling the tenor of this game, being able to win the turnover battle and get the job done. I did set my line at a 15. I'm going to be willing to lay with Northern Iowa, and I do like the under. I set my total at a 131, 779, 780 on the card. Eastern Illinois is going to be on the road against Southeast Missouri State. SEMO does find themselves as a 12.5 point favorite. 146.5 is the total, and I set my line at 13. 12.5 is the absolute max, so I'm going to be willing to lay for Eastern Illinois. Just not great for this team in general. And typically, Eastern Illinois has a forte of being able to generate turnovers. They have fallen outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. For Eastern Illinois, right now, they are checking in 303rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Southeast Missouri State, they are more around about 281st, as Southeast Missouri State still doing a relatively okay job in terms of generating turnovers themselves. This is a bunch that is really going to be taking it on the chin on the glass. But for Eastern Illinois, even though you got Cooper Jacoby giving you over 5 rebounds and 10 plus points per contest, he was more productive last year. 342nd in all of college basketball in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so that means that Southeast Missouri State should be able to control this game. And for Southeast Missouri State, at home, their line teams only grab 13.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Obviously, that's a number that is going to be regressing quite a bit, but for Eastern Illinois, outside of Jacoby, you've only got one other player that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. That would be Terry McMorris, who's been supplying about 9.6 rebounds per game. And I like what Zion Brewster brings to the table. 16.5 points, mid-30s, 3-point shooter, but he's been missing with injury. Andre Washington, who comes on over from Long Island, he was expected to be a big-time player for this team. He's been able to give them 13.5 points per game in the 4 games that he's been playing, and should be good to go in this one after he missed like the first 8 or 9 games due to injury. So this is an Eastern Illinois team that's a little bit better than what they were towards the beginning part of the season because they were dealing with all those injuries. That said, you still have a Southeast Missouri State team that I think is going to do a nice job controlling this game with Luka and Dovar, who's been able to give you about 14 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, giving you about 3.5 rebounds per game. It is a bunch in SEMO that has been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and that's big going up against an Eastern Illinois team that's just not been able to take care of the ball. Right now, they are outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and then we've got the duo of Braxton Stecker along with B.J. Ward, who combined for 25 points per game. Stecker shoots about 35% for 3, 93% at the free throw line. Both of these guys combined for about 2.5 steals per game. And with this Southeast Missouri State team. They really push things inside. They're inside the top 75 in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from two-point range. And Southeast Missouri State, they themselves are a top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. With this Eastern Illinois team, they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. So, do you think that Southeast Missouri State does find a way to be able to get the job done here? Semi-total at a 147. So, along with laying it with Southeast Missouri State here at a 146.5, I'm in on the over. 781, 782 on the card. Murray State, they're going to be on the road against Illinois Chicago. UIC does find themselves as a home underdog of 6.5 points, and the total on this game, it is 160.5 to 161.5, and with the UIC, I did set them as a home underdog of 7.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with Murray State. Murray State is looking to play with a lot of tempo, 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois Chicago is very much more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 204th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Illinois Chicago, the big issue that you've got with this team is actually two of them. For one, they're turning the ball over 13 times per game outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and they're also getting blitzed on the glass. They are allowing opponents to grab 37.3% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 353rd in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so that means lots of second and third chances here for a Murray State team that has been able to do a good job of being able to push things inside. They are number one in the country in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from two-point range, as you got Frederick King down low, who's been able to do a nice job as a big man, supplying a little bit over 12.5 points, 7.9 rebounds per game, and then Javon Jackson shoots 42.5% from three, 16.5 points per game, actually played for Illinois Chicago last year, so no love lost there. And for Murray State, they've been a top 60 team overall with their three-point shooting percentage at 37.5%. Roman Dean, 12.5 points. He's been able to shoot 39% from three. J.J. Traynor shoots 43% from the outside. Mason Miller shoots 50% from three, albeit that's pretty much all that he does, but I'll take that one-trick pony any day of the week. And then for Illinois Chicago, this squad is shooting from three-point range more around about 31.5%, so they haven't been able to do a great job there, but even with their two-point shooting percentage, they are trying to pile drive the ball down low. They're outside the top 225 with that regard as well. Andy Johnson has been able to supply 13.5 points per game along with Ahmad Henderson. Henderson only shoots 29% from three. Johnson more around 36% from the outside. They combine for 5 assists per game, but again, the turnovers are very rampant for the team. Elijah Crawford dealing with injury throughout much of the season has been rough. Makai Lowry has been able to give you 9 points, right around about 5.5 rebounds per game, and to the credit of UIC, even though they're getting absolutely blasted on the defensive glass, they are a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their own misses that result in an offensive rebound, but even though they have been a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, so outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, I think that that's just enough for you to be able to get an over on that 160.5. I did set my total at 161.5, so 161 or less in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Murray State. 783, 784 on the card. Sacramento State is on the road facing off against Idaho State, and Idaho State is a 10.5 to an 11-point favorite. Total on this game, 147.5 to a 149, and with Idaho State, I did set them as a 10.5-point favorite, so I'm willing to lay up to 10 with them. For Idaho State, this unit has been very interesting to say the least with regards to their offense, and I do think that there's going to be quite a bit of regression to what they've been doing here, and right now at the 11, that does become my buy point on Sacramento State. But for Idaho State, they're overall 125th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you look at their home games and their home games alone, currently they're clocking in number 8. Again, I think that you see a little bit of regression there. In Sacramento State, they're just 312th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they do have a really nice go-to point guard in Mikey Williams, who's had to pretty much carry the team all by himself. For Mikey Williams, doing a nice job supplying the team with about 15 points, 5.5 assists per game, and with Jeremiah Cherry dealing with an injury over the last 6 or so games, we have not seen him in quite a few weeks. That means that this team has been very fragile in the post. Now, Prophet Johnson has been able to do a bit of everything, 2.7 steals, 9 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 16.5 points per game, and he shoots 40% from three-point range, while with Williams, he has been having 5.5 assists, about 3.2 turnovers per game. There's just not a lot around these guys, so as you're looking to someone like a Brandon Gardner or Jaden Teeth, these guys that give you between about 5 to 7 points per game to be able to give you a little bit more of something for Sacramento State. They are outside the top 175 in terms of ball security, and Sacramento State has fallen outside the top 225 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with them as they do a nice job in terms of guarding the outside top 125 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and you're going to have a little bit of a tempo war going on as Sacramento State, they are currently 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. This is an Idaho State team that is only 339th, and for Idaho State, they've been able to do a really rock-solid job in terms of being able to control the boards once again this year as well. They do find themselves in the top 100 with regards to rebound percentage, as Evan Otten is not giving you a lot of scoring, but 1.7 blocks, 4.5 rebounds to go along, 4.5 points per game. Caleb Vandergreen has been giving you about 14.5 points on 40% three-point shooter shooter. Con Hellenbeck, he's been able to shoot 39% from three with about 14 points, 5 rebounds per game. So these guys have been able to do a pretty solid job with that regard. And for Idaho State, their main kryptonite has actually been opponents' 2-point shooting percentage or outside the top 200 with that regard. But I do think that for Sacramento State, in a little bit of a slowdown game against an Idaho State team that really doesn't force the issue too much in terms of generating turnovers, they do just enough to hold in there. I did set my line at a 10.5, so 11 plus won't take the points with Sacramento State. I do think that Idaho State continues to execute very well on offense, especially against a Sacramento State team outside the top 240 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I'm going to be in on the over and the points with Sacramento State, 785, 786. Montana State plays us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado is a underdog of 2.5 to 3.5 points. Total on this game, it is 149 to 149.5. And with Montana State, I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Northern Colorado, once again, doing a really good job in terms of executing on offense. And Northern Colorado always does a really good job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. For Northern Colorado, overall, they're about 85th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in a road/shoot-score venue that does creep up into the top 40. And for Montana State, this has been a unit that has been more in that neighborhood, about 186th in terms of points per possession, but they're averaging about 14.7 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. But what this Montana State team is doing a really good job of is being able to guard the three-point line. They're allowing teams to shoot only about 30.7% from three-point. That is a top 65 mark in all of college basketball. And to the credit of Northern Colorado, teams are only shooting about 29.6% from three-point against them. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. And with both of these teams, you're not going to get a lot of second and third chances. Northern Colorado, 282nd in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Montana State, 269th in the country. So these two teams not going to be able to generate a ton there. But for Northern Colorado, the key for the team being able to keep the ball clean as they are turning the ball for about 11.5 times per game, a little bit above country average there. Quinn Dinker has done a nice job headlining things, 18.5 points, 6.3 assists per game. He shoots 39% from three. And Brock Wisney, 41.5% three-point shooter with about 16.5 points per game. Zach Block has been able to shoot 52% from three. So you've got some nice go-to scores along this roster. But this is a Northern Colorado team that can be very much hurt on the inside. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, though their own two-point shooting percentage is in the top 35 in all of college basketball. And for Northern Colorado, once again, find themselves in the top 30 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So again, not going to get a lot of second and third chances for either team. But for Montana State, they've been able to do a nice job with Patrick McMahon leading things from the outside, giving the team 15.5 points on 38.5% three-point shooting. This is a Montana State team that is very content to bomb from the outside. They're a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, and for Montana State, top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. This despite the fact that you don't have anyone on the roster that gives you over 2.3 assists per game. They're just really good by committee. Davion Brown, Jed Miller have been able to combine for about 23 points per game, and with Brown, he shoots 42% from three-point. We've dealt with some injuries down low. Seth Armand has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. Christian King has missed a few games as well, but King should be good to go in this game, and in the last few games, a combined 26 points, so he seems to be coming into his own. When with this Montana State team, with the way that they do a nice job themselves of guarding the arc, I do think that they do just enough to be able to get the job done in a game where I think it's going to be interesting in terms of tempo, because you do have a Montana State team that's looking to play at a little bit more of a control pace, 262nd in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Colorado is 67, so set my line at 5.5. I'm willing to lay with Montana State. Made my total a 149.5, so out of 149, I'm in on the over. 787, 788 on the card. UC San Diego is on the road against Cal Poly. Cal Poly does find themselves as a home underdog of 8.5 points. 169 to 169.5 is the total line with UC San Diego. I did set them as a favorite of 6.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal Poly. With Cal Poly, the biggest weakness at this team is ball security. They're outside the top 340 in terms of total turnovers on a per possession basis, and they go up against a UC San Diego team that has been really good with their offense, despite the fact that they're really not pushing a lot of tempo. For San Diego, they're about 222nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you know that Cal Poly is just going to run it and gun it. Currently, they're number 4 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. In San Diego, if they miss their first shot, they're really not going to grab a second opportunity. They're currently 299th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and Cal Poly has not been bad on the glass. But that said, this is a San Diego team that I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression to them, currently being 65th overall in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But interestingly, in a road/shoot-score venue, they go up into the top 25 because this team has just been so hot from three. Right now, they're shooting 39.9% from three-point range away from home. That compares to about 33% when they are at home. And for UC San Diego, main man for this team has really been able to come through and has been able to give the team a lot of production, has been Leo Beth, who's been been supplying 18 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 49% from three-point range. And then Tom Beatty, Aiden Burke, these two guys are combining for more around about 22.5 points per game, 3.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds per game for Beatty as well. And this has been a San Diego team that's done a nice job taking care of the ball, top 75 team in terms of ball security. But in a nip and tuck spot, they do shoot 67% of the free throw line. Outside the top 3 here with that regard, they've also been a team that's been allowing quite a few good looks from three-point range. They do allow teams to shoot over 33.5% from three-point range outside the top 225 with that regard. And for this Cal Poly team, you've had Hamad Musa be that main man with about 20.5 points. He's shooting 40% from three. And Cal Poly as a whole, they shoot 35% from three-point range. And with this Cal Poly team, they have been very vulnerable on the inside. They're outside the top 3 here in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but this team is very content to bomb it from three. They're a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. With this Cal Poly team, they've been a relatively okay team on the glass as well. You've been able to get good production with about 5 boards, 16 points per game out of Caden Ward, who's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and Kerryon Elliott dealt with a little bit of injury towards the beginning part of the season. He's now full go, going 40% from three-point range with about 5 points per contest. Do think the Cal Poly holds in there, and I do think that you see a little bit of regression with the three-point shooting of UC San Diego. Set my total at a 168.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be one to take the points with Cal Poly. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we eat the extra games. 789, 790. Cal State Fullerton is going to be playing us to UC Santa Barbara. Gauchos are a 4.5 to a 5.5 point road favorite. 159.5 to 161.5 is the total, and me and my total a 156.5. I'm in on the under. Now Fullerton is absolutely looking to gun it. Currently, they are 5th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you're going to have a very interesting tempo war because for UC Santa Barbara, this is a team that is checking in 306th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but this is also a Santa Barbara team that is doing a solid job on the defensive glass. Really, both of these teams are. Fullerton 10th in defensive rebound percentage at home. 17.1% of opponents' missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound. Santa Barbara is 4th in terms of defensive rebound percentage away from home, with teams only grabbing about 20.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and I do think that the Santa Barbara team is a little bit more rounded. I set them as a 4.5 point favorite at a 5+. I would be willing to take the points with Fullerton, mainly because Santa Barbara has just been so bad with their 3-point shooting defense. Right now, they're allowing teams to shoot about 37.9% from the outside, bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, but I have to love what Aiden Mahaney brings to the table. 15 points. He shoots 44% from three, and Colin Smith shooting 46.5% from the outside, 12.5 points per game. So to offset the fact that they're so bad with their 3-point shooting defense, Santa Barbara, top 45 team with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage. And for Santa Barbara, about country average with regards to both their 2-point shooting offense and defense. Mario Little dealing with injury with his 11.5 points and 4 assists per game. That has been hampering the offense just a little bit. And it does feel like Santa Barbara is starting to be able to find their sea legs a little bit more with regards to their defense. They've now given up 68 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Fullerton team that just got absolutely blasted a few days ago when they played against Oklahoma State, so that was a little bit of an issue, but they're doing a much better job taking care of the ball. They become a top 175 team in terms of ball security. After last year, they had just none of that whatsoever, but team only shoots about 32.5% from 3 with Josh Ward leading things with 15 points, shoots about 34.5% from 3, and Landon Seaman, he's been able to give you 14 points, shoots 40% from the outside. Not a lot of second chances for this Fullerton team. They're outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they too give it up from 3. They're allowing teams to shoot 36.5% from the outside, but with the way that both of these teams prevent second and third chances, and Fullerton has become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I think that that'll be enough to be able to get you the under, so my total 156.5, like the under, and at 5+, I'm willing to take the points with Cal State Fullerton. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502, Stetson is on the road against North Alabama. North Alabama, a sizable favorite here of 9.5 points, total on this game, it is 144.5, and I'm willing to lay with North Alabama. I did set them as a 12.5 point favorite. Now, I recognize that things have just not been tremendous for North Alabama. They lose pretty much an entire backcourt from a season ago, and they're just not the same 3-point shooting team that they've been in the past. They're about 251st in the country in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but Stetson typically is a really good 3-point shooting team, and they're shooting 30% for 3, which goes down to 24.7% away from home, and this is not a Stetson team that is going to be controlling the boards whatsoever. Right now for Stetson, outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage, you do have Jamie Phillips, who's been able to give you 14 points. He's supplying the team with about 5.5 rebounds per game, and you also get 5.2 rebounds, 8.5 points out of Colin Cole, but Those are the lone two guys on the roster that give you over 3 rebounds per game for Stetson. It's a Stetson team that is back to playing a little bit more slow and control, 276 in terms of total possessions per game. North Alabama's not looking to push a lot of tempo either. North Alabama, they're hovering more in that neighborhood, about 290th or so in terms of total possessions per game. But with North Alabama, they're going to be able to control things down low, as Cornelius Williams has been able to average darn near double-double for this team right now, supplying about 10.3 rebounds, 13 points per game, and Dante Bacchus has been able to step up with about 5.5 boards, 13.5 points per game. It's a North Alabama team that's also outside the top 3 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. That said, this is a squad that's done a nice job taking care of the ball, top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Really not going to force the issue defensively. They are outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense, but Evan Kanan Jefferson stepping up with 11.5 points per game. Kevin Dekovic has also been able to give you about 11.5 points per game. I think these guys give you a little bit more, and it's a Stetson team that they themselves have not been great in terms of guarding the 3-point line outside the top 3 in all of college basketball. I think that you get a rather slow and controlled game, but a rather efficient offensive game. Right now I'm seeing a 144 out there. I would be willing to take the over, as I did set my total at a 144.5, so in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 here with Stetson. 306-503, 306-504. Central Arkansas plays us for Florida Gulf Coast. Gulf Coast is a 2.5-point road favorite. 158.5 is the total, and I did set Central Arkansas as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Now, for Florida Gulf Coast, they've been a top 75 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 36%, but Central Arkansas all of a sudden is starting to play a little bit of defense. Teams are shooting less than 32% from 3 against them. That's the top 120 mark in all of college basketball. And Cameron Under has been a really nice go-to scorer for the team. 16.5 points. He only shoots about 32% from 3, but has helped this team really just find a little bit of a defensive swagger that they haven't had in the past. Typically, Central Arkansas is just absolutely awful on defense, but now they become a team that does a nice job in terms of generating turnovers. 5 out of their top 6 scorers generate at least 1 steal per game. Central Arkansas, 53rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with Ty Robinson coming in, giving the team 13.5 points per game. Now, they've dealt with an injury to Rashad Bolden. He was coming in from Southern Miss, and that's been hurting them quite a bit, but that said, this is a Florida Gulf Coast team that, as well, has been just very wobbly in terms of what they've been able to get down low, because this is a team that gives themselves a lot of second and third chances. Top 35 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they're also outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Jordan Ellerby along with J.R. Kaczynski, they're eating good in the neighborhood with a combined about 29.5 points per game. Between the two of them, they shoot about 36.5 to 37% from 3-point range, and Kaczynski is able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Florida Gulf Coast has become a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're also outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And interestingly, Central Arkansas is typically a very up-tempo team. They've slowed it down just a little bit this year to about 93rd in terms of total possessions per game. Florida Gulf Coast is absolutely gunning it at about 36th in terms of total possessions per game, but they've slowed down quite a bit recently, and I do think that they're going to get back to their soul roots. So my total 150, I'm in on the under, and I do like Central Arkansas here on the money line. Made Central Arkansas the 2-point favorite. 306-505, 306-506. Jacksonville is going to be on the road facing off against Lipscomb. Lipscomb 11.5 to 12-point favorites. 145.5 to 146 is the total. I set my line at 17.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Lipscomb. Lipscomb is doing a pretty solid job on the turnover front, as this is a Lipscomb team that should be able to really take advantage of a Jacksonville team that's not very efficient on offense. 298th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 307th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and with Lipscomb 19th in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis at home. Now Lipscomb overall is about 215th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but we've got Grant Ansman at 6'10", giving you great versatility, shooting 44% from 3, 14 points, 6 rebounds per game. Ross Caldino, he's been able to shoot about 39% from 3, 11.5 points, 6 boards per contest out of him as well. And this is a Lipscomb team that has been outside the top 2 with regards to rebound percentage, but this is a unit as well that has been able to do a nice job in terms of maximizing those possessions, and they themselves are a top 80 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Jacksonville squad that has 2 guys that are averaging about 10 points per game, and Jalen Jones along Chris Arias, but outside those 2 guys, you just don't get a lot from the outside. Hayden Wood shoots about 37.5% from 3, 8.5 points per game, but for Jacksonville, this is a team that's looking to play at a rather controlled pace. Meanwhile, you've got a Lipscomb team that's looking to gun it a little bit more. Lipscomb about 56th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, Jacksonville more around about 278th, but the nearly 13 turnovers per game, very, very costly, and it's not like this is a squad that is doing a supreme job on the glass. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. They've been a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, percentage, but you only have one guy on the roster, that'd be Donovan Rivers, who's giving you 4.8 rebounds per game, supplying more than 3.7 rebounds per game with the overall versatility and size of Lipscomb, having someone in 6'10" Charlie Williams, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. I do think that Lipscomb finds a way to be able to win this game in very convincing fashion, and I do think that the turnovers going to be costly for this total. Semi-total at 143.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay with Lipscomb. Set Lipscomb as a 17.5 point favorite. 3-6-5-0-7, 3-6-5-0-8. Eastern Kentucky is on the road against Queens NC. Queens NC is a 4.5 point favorite. 168.5 is the total, and I did set my line at 7.5. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Queens NC. Now, Queens NC has been absolutely awful on defense recently. Then again, they've been playing against the likes of Arkansas and Auburn, so they've been playing some really, really good competition. And for Queens NC, this is still a very good offense. 88th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And if you look specifically at their home games, and their home games only, they actually lead the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That'll see a little bit of regression there. Meanwhile, Eastern Kentucky, not number one in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're more on about 263rd. And for Eastern Kentucky, this is still a team that's doing a pretty solid job in terms of giving themselves some second and third chances on the glass. They've been a top 100 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with Juan Cranford being a main headline scorer in the backcourt, 12.5 points, shoots 36% from three-point range. And when they get to the free throw line, their top three scorers in Austin Ball, Cranford, and Turner Buttery all shoot at least 78.9% at the free throw line. But his team is also, because they always try to maximize being able to generate turnovers, they've fallen outside the top 125 for one in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're outside the top 225 in terms of their own ball security, and now they're outside the top 265 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, so they've got a lot going wrong there. Meanwhile, for Queens NC, you know what you're going to be able to get out of Nasir, man. He has been the man that has been able to give you 15 plus points per contest, so he's been highly productive with that regard. They're not quite the same team down low with regards to their shot blocking, as you had a guy that was able to give you 3 plus blocks per contest in Malcolm Brown, but you do have a guy, a man, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Avante Parker at 6'9", he's got good versatility with about 11 points. He's shooting about 50% from three, which obviously small sample size there. And for Queens NC, even though they've been so efficient on offense, it's not like they're like some sort of flamethrower from three. They're only shooting about 35% from three-point range, but they do a nice job in terms of being able to just drive the ball inside. They've been a top 65 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They make the most out of their possessions, and they're also outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And Queens NC fast, but not necessarily gunning it fast. 89th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Kentucky about 161st. So I do think that Queens NC going to step up a little bit more defensively. So if I total 163.5, I like the under, and with Queens NC, set them as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. 3-6-5-0-9, 3-6-5-10. Bellarmine is on the road against West Georgia. West Georgia finds themselves as 1.5 point home underdogs. 156 is the total, and with this total, I set mine at a 150.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Now Bellarmine back outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but also super duper slow. 302nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and West Georgia has been much more respectable on defense this year than they were a season ago. And also for West Georgia, last year they were one of the more slow teams they were going to find in all of college basketball. Not necessarily the same snail this year. West Georgia, 44th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you're going to have a nice little bit of a tempo war here. And I do believe that West Georgia actually has the best player in this game, which is a big reason why I did set them as the favorite in this spot of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. And that man would be Sheldon Williams-Dryden. Williams-Dryden has been able to do a really nice job in terms of giving the team over 5.5 rebounds per game. He's supplying 15 plus points per contest. Not necessarily a guy that's going to be super duper versatile with his 3-point shooting, but on the threes that he takes, he shoots about 42% from 3-point range. And then Josh Smith has helped out with about 15.5 points. He shoots 36% from 3-point range. West Georgia is a top 75 team with their 3-point shooting percentage. Now they're also outside the top 330 with their 2-point shooting percentage. And West Georgia is a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, but also for West Georgia, they've been a top 155 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And this is a Bellarmine team that they are very content to be going bombs away from three. They shoot 35.5% from the outside for Bellarmine. They do a solid job in terms of maximizing their offense, top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home, but also a team that's outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with Jack Garzinski really being the main scorer for the team, as he's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with 21 points per contest. You've had Keenan Gooden be able to step up. He's been able to give you about 11 points, 2.5 assists per game, and problem is he's really the main facilitator for the team, along Darius Bolden, who's been able to give you 2.6 assists per game while giving you only 1.8 points per contest. It's a Bellarmine team that just does not do a great job in terms of forcing the issue on defense, and the offense, I mean, it's solid with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 40 team with with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. When they can get to the free throw line, they shoot 81% at the charity stripe, but they just don't do any way in terms of being able to maximize possessions, as they're averaging 6.3 offensive rebounds per game. That is dead stinking last in all of college basketball. With their slow pace of play, I just think that this is a West Georgia team that's going to be able to find a way to get the job done here at home. Set my total 115.5. I like the under and West Georgia here on the money line, and wrap things up with 306-511, 306-512. Austin Peay is playing us in North Florida. North Florida is a 13.5 point underdog. 162.5 to 163.5 is the total, and with Austin Peay, I'm going to be willing to lay it. I did set them as a favorite of 18.5 points with Austin Peay. This squad has been very good in terms of generating turnovers, and just with regards to their overall defense. With Austin Peay in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team does find themselves in the top 100, and they've been able to do a nice job in terms of limiting three-point shots. Teams are shooting just 31.3% from three-pointers against them. That drops to 20% at home. That is a number that is certainly going to be regressing a little bit, but that said, this is a North Florida team that in terms of points scored on a per possession basis is 300th, and they're last in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing over 43% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. They are allowing way too many second and third chances, and with Austin Peay, they were a little bit suspect to begin the year down low, but having Rashad Marshall come over from Arkansas State, be able to fly the team with 6.5 rebounds per game, that's helping out quite a bit. Overall for Austin Peay, they do find themselves in the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage, and with generating over 17 turnovers per game in their D1 and non-D1 games, that means that North Florida is going to be having a tough time being able to find good, clean possessions. You've got Colin Parker on this Austin Peay team being able to supply about 15 points per contest, as well as shooting 39.5% from three. It's about a country average team with this Austin Peay bunch in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, but with North Florida, even though you would have been able to have Cameron Oriole be able to step up, he's supplied about 18.5 points per game, shooting 43% from three-point. The guys around him just aren't doing a ton. The only other double-figure scorer is Ken Jackson, giving you 11.5 points per game. You've only got one player on the roster that's giving you over 4.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Mason Lee, who's giving you 4.2 rebounds per game, so they're getting absolutely killed down low. This is also a unit that has been outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. With this Austin Peay team, they've been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their interior offense in terms of being able to drive the ball down low, and I do think that Austin Peay going to very much shake it to a North Florida team that has absolutely no rebounding to speak of, and with Austin Peay being able to generate the turnovers, I do think that that causes for a little bit of a lower scoring game, so I told 162.5, so you're at the 163 plus. I'm in on the under with an Austin Peay team that is relatively mid-tempo as well. North Florida very much looking to push tempo, 48th in terms of total possessions per game. Austin Peay 145th, but in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Austin Peay, and that'll wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Soup, sound part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soup, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean doesn't matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I am with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.